Chapter 566. Heaven and earth suddenly fell silent. Not long ago, the northern state declared independence. The Shen emperor ignored the objections of his ministers and appointed the Hahuan sect's grand elder as the Shen nation state advisor. After that, this person personally went to the ancestral court of the three sections. Although no one knew what happened, the three sects that watched the northern state declare independence suddenly agreed to help the royal family suppress the rebellion, and the three supremacies came together. They thought that this was a battle without suspense. Who would have thought that before the battle officially started, the Hahuan sect's grand elder was killed by an arrow? Even his essence spirit was not left behind. On the lotus platform, the three supremacies' faces were full of shock. The Shen emperor's eyes were wide open. He couldn't believe what he just saw. Someone as strong as the state advisor was gone just like that? After a brief moment of silence, a monstrous uproar broke out. The state advisor was killed? What Dharma treasure is that? Retreat quickly. The first to react were the three supremacies. Although they didn't say a word, a golden light appeared under their feet. They drove the lotus platform and shot into the distance. If that bow could kill the Hahuan sect's grand elder, it could also kill them. But someone didn't want them to do so. Zhou Zhong took a step forward and appeared in front of one of the supremacies. He said calmly, "Since you're already here, don't be in a hurry to leave." The other supremacies was just about to escape when a strong suction force burst out from behind and sucked his body back. At the end of the suction force was a figure emitting demonic aura and corpse aura. No one stopped the last supremacies. He disappeared into the sky in an instant. Li Mu wasn't in a hurry. The monk can run away, but the temple can't. Unless he left the Shen nation, Li Mu would find him sooner or later. He lay in the Empress' arms and the scene from his dream reappeared. At this moment, he could use the mantra to recover his Dharma power, but there was no need to. Zhou Yi knew that Li Mu could quickly recover his Dharma power, but she pretended to forget. The two of them hugged quietly like this, completely ignoring the anxious battle around them. Although Zhou Zhong was strong, he wasn't at the seventh realm. It was already rare for him to be able to fight a Buddhist supremacies to a standstill with his unique skills. That demonic corpse's opponent was a similarly powerful seventh realm cultivator. It did not gain any advantage at all. When the imperial advisor was shot to death, the cultivators of the Shen kingdom behind him panicked. Now that even the venerables had fled without fighting, there was no point for them to stay here. After coming to their senses, they immediately scattered in all directions. But at this moment, a giant bell descended from the sky, enveloping all of them. Countless people attacked the bell, but they could only make it tremble slightly. The young emperor of the Shen kingdom had a dull expression on his face. This was just a personal expedition without any suspense. He had never imagined that the powerful imperial advisor and the three venerables would end up with one dead and one escaping. The other two couldn't escape even if they wanted to. The expression on Sangu's face was also very sluggish, but after the sluggishness, it was ecstasy. If they could kill an expert of the Hahuan sect with one arrow, they would be able to do whatever they wanted in the Shen nation. Li Mu's expression was calm. He didn't feel proud because of such a battle result. His opponent was never the Shen nation, nor was it the Hahuan sect of the demonic way. It was Xuanzong. If he couldn't even deal with such a small matter, how could he fight against the #1 sect in the world? After cuddling with the Empress for a while, Li Mu was too embarrassed to lie in her arms. He slapped his forehead and said, "I forgot that I can quickly recover my spiritual power." He formed a hand seal and said the word, Jia, softly. Endless power of heaven and earth surged in, and his spiritual power quickly recovered by half. With the Jia mantra, Li Mu only needed a short time to recover his spiritual power to shoot arrow after arrow. The power of the sun-shooting bow was stronger than he imagined. The Hahuan sect's great elder was a level 7 cultivator just like the Lord of Illusions. Yet, he was unable to defend against an arrow shot with all his might. Although this arrow would have drained the spiritual energy of a normal level 6 cultivator and caused them to lose their ability to fight, it was not a loss to exchange for the death of a high-level cultivator. The demonic corpse that was fighting against a venerable was already showing signs of defeat. Li Mu drew the bow and poured in 10% of his spiritual power. Another arrow condensed on the bow and pointed at the venerable. This venerable of the Nirvana sect had already suppressed the demonic corpse. Suddenly, he felt a sense of danger. He turned around and saw a golden arrow aimed at him. The scene of the Hahuan sect's great elder being swallowed by the black hole lingered in his mind. This arrow could really threaten his life. The Venerable's expression changed. He could only raise his hands and place them flat in front of his chest to show his surrender. The young man didn't shoot that arrow. He was giving him a chance to surrender. Li Mu saw the Venerable make a gesture of surrender and point the arrow at the other Venerable. Without much hesitation, the old monk made the same choice as the previous Venerable. After the sun-shooting bow's arrow was condensed, it couldn't be retracted. Li Mu aimed it at the sky above his head and released it. A golden light shot into the sky and finally disappeared. This time, 4 7th-level cultivators came from the Shen nation. 1 was dead, 1 escaped, and 2 were captured. The remaining cultivators of the Shen nation's defense army couldn't pose any threat at all. They were trapped in the Dao Bell and were still crazily attacking. Li Mu ignored them for the time being. Once his spiritual power was exhausted, they would be obedient. With a sun-shooting bow in hand, he looked at the 2 venerables who had given up resisting and said calmly, "Hand over your soul blood." The 2 venerables never thought that there would be a time when they would hand over their soul blood. Against an expert of the same level, they still had the strength to fight. However, that bow was so terrifying that it made them despair. The Hahuan sect's Grand Elder threatened them with the demonic path. The 3 sects knew how terrifying the demonic path was and had no choice but to interfere in the northern states' affairs. In the end, they had no one to blame but themselves for ending up like this. After a while, Li Mu put away the 2 drops of soul blood and said to Zhou Zhong, "One escaped. Take them with you." Just now, the Venerable from the Yen sect had escaped. Zhou Zhong took the demon corpse and the other 2 venerables to the Yen sect's ancestral court. Li Mu floated in the air and carefully examined the bow in his hand. This bow gave him a great surprise today. At the same time, deep in the South Sea, on an island shrouded in ghostly fog, the stone coffin at the top of the tower suddenly opened. A skinny old man flew out of the coffin and said angrily, "Hahuan is dead." A red-robed young man sitting cross-legged in the tower opened his eyes. His eyes were blood-red. He said in a low voice, "Who is it that can make even his essence spirit unable to escape?" The skinny old man said coldly, "I'll go and see for myself." He took a step and was already outside the tower. When he lifted his foot again, he appeared on the sea 100 miles away. Not long after, the space on the shore of the South Sea fluctuated and the skinny old man's figure appeared. He had just lifted his foot but was unable to take a step forward. On the beach not far ahead stood an old man. The old man was stooped and his face was full of spots. He did not have many strands of hair and looked like he was about to die. However, it made the 3rd forefather of the demon sect tremble in his hollow eyes. "Tianjizi." He looked at the old man and slowly spat out a few words from his throat. The old man also looked at him and said, "Go back." The 3rd forefather retracted his leg that had already stepped forward. He looked at the old man and suddenly smiled. "So what if you can calculate my movements? How can a mortal like you pry into the mysteries of heaven? You frequently pry into things you shouldn't be prying into. You don't have many years left in your lifespan, do you?" The old man said faintly, "At least before this old man dies, you can't set foot in the ancestral province." The 3rd forefather of the demon sect looked gloomy in the face of his old rival. He asked, "It's been so many years. What have you been holding on to?" The old man looked at him and asked back, "It's been 10,000 years. You didn't hesitate to pass down your memories from generation to generation and scourge the Zhu continent for 10,000 years. What is it for?" The 3rd forefather of the demon sect looked very serious. He said in a deep voice, "We're looking for a way out. We're looking for the door that was closed by your ancestors for their own selfish interests." The old man was silent for a moment and asked, "What if it's not a way out but a dead end behind the door?" The 3rd forefather of the demon sect's eyes flickered. He said, "We'll only know what's behind the door after we open it." Chapter 567. Not long after Zhou Zhong left with the demon corpse and the 2 subservient supremacies, he returned. The other 2 sects had already submitted. The supremacy of the Yen sect did not put up much resistance and handed over his soul blood. At this moment, the 3 of them were filled with regret. They did not expect their opponents to be so powerful. They also did not expect the Hahuan sect's 1st elder to be so weak. In order to protect themselves, they could only hand over their soul blood. If they had known this would happen, they would have let Bei Bang be free. In a hall on Mount Jingang, Li Mu looked at the three old monks and said lightly, "Hand over your sect's heavenly book." After a short silence, the three of them shook their heads at the same time. An old monk said, "The heavenly book is no longer in our sect." Li Mu's face darkened. He said coldly, "Do I look like I'm easy to fool?" The old monk put his palms together and said, "I swear on the name of Buddha that our sect's heavenly book was taken away by the demon sect 100 years ago. This is also the reason why Nirvana sect has been declining over the past 100 years. The other two old monks also said, "Our heavenly book was also taken away by the demon sect 100 years ago." Li Mu frowned. He vaguely felt that these three old monks were not lying. The heavenly book was very important. Li Mu naturally would not believe them so easily. He asked Xianxia to lead people to investigate the three sections. He actually found out that the three Buddhist sects of the Shen nation had not had a disciple comprehending the heavenly book for 100 years. After careful investigation, he found out more secrets. More than 100 years ago, the three Buddhist sects were attacked by the devil sect at the same time. In the end, the Buddhist sects were defeated. Although the three sects were saved in the end, their heavenly tomes were taken away. To be precise, the powerhouses of the three Buddhist sects had used the heavenly books to exchange for the inheritance of their sections. Li Mu could not help but recall that for thousands of years, the Lu school had been attacked by the demon sect several times. However, with the help of the Dao Bell and the other sects, they had successfully repelled the demon sect powerhouses each time. The other sects, including Xuanzong, had the same experience. The Buddhist sect was weaker than the Taoist sect and could not resist the invasion of the devil path. It was no wonder that in the past 100 years, the mainland's Buddhist sects were not as good as before. If not for the fact that the ancestral court of the Heart sect was in the Great Zhou, they would probably end up in the same situation as these three sections. In short, Li Mu would not be able to obtain the heavenly book from them. Since then, of the confirmed heavenly sutra pages on the continent, 1 page was in Xuanzong's hands, 9 pages were in Li Mu's hands, and the remaining 14 pages were likely controlled by the demonic path. Wanting to obtain them wouldn't be easy. Li Mu temporarily stopped thinking about the heavenly book. This time, the Shen Kingdom's emperor had personally led the expedition. He had also brought a group of personal guards and the Shen Kingdom's nobles. All of them had been imprisoned in the Dao Bell. At this moment, they had already given up resisting and completely accepted their fate. If Li Mu was willing, he could incorporate the Shen nation into the Great Zhou territory in a very short period of time. But he had no intention of doing so. The two nations had different races, different systems, and different beliefs. Even if he conquered the Shen nation, there wouldn't be many benefits. Instead, it would bury a huge hidden danger for the future. Moreover, the imperial court was already unable to manage the 36 counties of the Great Zhou. If they added the Shen nation, they might not be able to manage it. Yesterday, a tsunami had occurred in the South Sea without warning. Several states near the sea had suffered varying degrees of flooding. If the Shen nation became a part of the Great Zhou, such matters of comforting the people and providing disaster relief would become part of the Great Zhou's responsibility. If the Shen nation was in trouble, the Great Zhou would have to waste money and manpower. Even if the imperial court agreed, the people might not agree. It was better to hand the Shen nation over to Zhou Zhong. He could use the Shen nation to advance, and the Great Zhou would no longer have to worry about the south. It could be said to be the best of both worlds. Li Mu also planned to build state temples in the various states of the Shen nation. There were many people in the Shen nation. Even if each person's psyche power was very small, when gathered together, it would be very considerate. Connecting these state temples with the Great Zhou's ancestral temple could accelerate the formation of the emperor's qi. However, the more than 20 states of the Shen nation had always been independent. It would not be easy to complete this plan. For a long time to come, what they needed to do was to subdue the various states. With Zhou Zhong's current power, it was only a matter of time before he completely integrated the Shen nation. The situation of the Shen nation had been settled. There was no need for Li Mu and the Empress to stay here. He used a sound-transmitting ritual implement to ask Xianxia. The two women were still in seclusion. The time it took for high-level cultivators to break through to the next realm varied from person to person. There was no pattern to it. Some people's fateful encounters would allow them to break through to the next realm in an instant. Some people needed days, months, or even years. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing should not need that long. Judging from the effects of the pills they had taken, it would take them at most 3 months to completely refine the effects of the pills. When he and the Empress returned to Chengdu, Shangguanli had already successfully broken through to the next realm. Mr. Mei was still in seclusion. The saint-level pills could only greatly increase the probability of breaking through to the next realm. Whether or not the cultivator could break through to the next realm depended on themselves. Without Mr. Mei, Li Mu and the Empress were of course more at ease. They could draw together in Chang'e Palace. In the name of discussing state affairs, they could dismiss the guards and maids, stroll in the imperial garden and admire the flowers. Or they could change their appearances and eat a bowl of noodles at a roadside noodle stall, fly a kite together, and watch the sunrise and sunset together. However, Shangguanli's existence often disturbed their plans to spend time together. Because Cheng Xian was always with the Empress, she had already been sent to a few dry counties to make rain. She would not be back for at least half a month. Shangguanli was the Empress's personal female official. She should be by the Empress's side all the time. Once or twice was enough to send her away, but if it happened too many times, it was inevitable that the Empress would become suspicious. Li Mu was already regretting it. If he had known earlier, he would have cut corners in her pill. If the effect of the pill was not so good, she might still be in seclusion now instead of being the third wheel between the two of them. In Chang'e Palace, Li Mu was reading a booklet. Zhou Yi was drawing. Shangguanli stood behind her, waiting for orders. Li Mu and Zhou Yi looked at each other and instantly understood each other's intentions. Zhou Yi coughed softly and said, "Ali, go to the National Treasury and check if there are any more pills, fulu, and the like. If there are not enough, let the Ministry of Revenue go to the shops of the various sects to buy more." A trace of doubt appeared in Shangguanli's eyes. These small matters were all handled by specialized officials. There was no need for her to go at all. Moreover, the Empress had never liked these complicated affairs of state. Why was she so concerned about these matters recently? The day before yesterday, she had gone to the Department of Worship to supervise the offerings. Yesterday, she had gone to the Ministry of Revenue to check the accounts. Today, she had gone to the National Treasury to check the inventory. Why did she feel that the Empress was intentionally sending her away? At this time, Zhou Yi said to Li Mu, "You've been reading the booklets for a long time. After you finish reading these, go back and rest." Li Mu nodded and said, "Yes." This was the secret code that the Empress and he had agreed on. The meaning of this sentence was that Li Mu should go back first and that the two of them would meet at the Li residence in a moment. If it was just sending away Shangguanli and leaving Li Mu in Chang'e Palace, the purpose would be too obvious. This way, Ali would not have any suspicions. Shangguanli also agreed and walked out of Chang'e Palace with a belly full of doubts. Li Mu looked through a few booklets. Seeing that Shangguanli had already walked far away, he exchanged a look with the Empress and also directly left the palace. He first bought a fish and some fresh vegetables at the market and cooked with the Empress. It was also a different kind of sweetness and romance. When he returned home, Li Mu pushed open the door and saw that there was already a figure standing in the courtyard. Towards these kinds of things, she was always more impatient than he was. He walked over and hugged the Empress who had turned into Shangguanli from behind. He asked, "What do you want to eat today?" The delicate body in his arms trembled. Soon after, he was blasted away by a tyrannical transcendence energy. Shangguanli retreated a few steps and looked at Li Mu with shame and anger. She gritted her teeth and said, "What are you doing?" Li Mu looked at her in shock and muttered, "You." Shangguanli crossed her arms in front of her chest and said angrily, "Are you crazy?" Li Mu instantly realized and immediately said, "Sorry, I mistook you for someone else." As his voice fell, the space in the Li residence fluctuated and another Shangguanli appeared in the courtyard. The two Shangguanli looked at each other. One was shocked and the other was flustered. Chapter 568. Shangguanli came to the Li mansion to ask Li Mu if he felt that Her Majesty was a little strange recently, but she didn't expect to see such a scene. She stood behind Li Mu. After the shock, she said angrily, "Who are you?" Zhou Yi went through the initial panic, but soon calmed down and returned to her original appearance. Seeing the familiar figure, Shangguanli trembled and said in disbelief, "Your Majesty!" She was full of doubts. She didn't understand why Her Majesty would change into her appearance and come to the Li mansion, until she remembered a rumor in Chengdu these days. It was a rumor that Li Mu and the Empress' personal maid were strolling hand in hand. Only now did she finally realize that it wasn't a rumor. Zhou walked to the door of the study and said, "Ali, come in with me." Shangguan Li glanced at Li Mu and walked into the study in a panic. After a long time she came out of the study, looked at Li Mu again, and then strode out of the Li mansion. Zhou walked to the yard and said, "It's fine if Ali knows. She won't tell anyone." As she spoke, she sighed softly in her heart. In the past, she always hid it, worried that it would be discovered. Out of helplessness, she felt a little better after telling Ali about it. In the future, she didn't have to hide these things in her heart, but could share them with someone. Li Mu also felt that this was a good thing. At least he didn't have to hide from Ali in the future. However, he always felt that since Li Mu knew about this, the way Ali looked at him was a little strange, as if Li Mu had stolen something important from her. Li Mu could understand her on this point. After all, as the Empress' personal maid, she was the only one who was favored. Now that the Empress's favor was given to him, it was inevitable that she felt disappointed. Just like Li Mu didn't want her to compete with him for favor in the past. Since leaving the Zhou family, the Empress had no relatives. Ali and Mr. Mei were the closest people to her, just like her family. And the Empress's family was his family. Li Mu also didn't want Ali to be sad because she was neglected, so when he brought breakfast of love for the Empress, he would also bring a portion for her. Occasionally, he would prepare a small gift for the Empress so that he wouldn't forget her. Finally, one day, Shangguan Li no longer looked at Li Mu as if something important had been taken away. However, her gaze became very vigilant. She gritted her teeth and said to Li Mu, "Let me tell you, don't even think about having any ideas about me. I don't like men." Li Mu understood what she meant and frowned. "What are you thinking? Am I that kind of person?" Shangguan Li looked at him indifferently and asked, "Isn't that so?" Li Mu couldn't refute. In order to show that he didn't have any other thoughts about her, he stretched out his hand and said, "Then give me back what I gave you." Shangguan Li was stunned and asked, "How can there be someone like you?" Li Mu shrugged and said, "I'm just proving to you that I don't have any other thoughts about you." Shangguan Li gritted her teeth and took off a hairpin from her hair. She also took off 2 delicate earrings and put them heavily in Li Mu's hand. She asked, "Is this enough?" These women's accessories were given to her by Li Mu when he gave the Empress gifts. Li Mu put them away and said, "You also ate my breakfast many times." Shangguan Li's face darkened and said, "I will give it back to you." Li Mu continued, "You also took my breakthrough pill." Shangguan Li said angrily, "That was given to me by Her Majesty." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "All right, that doesn't count." Shangguan Li left in a huff. Not far away, Zhang Chun and Prince Shou, who were leaning on the white jade railing in front of the square, shook their heads at the same time. Zhang Chun said with a face full of indignation, "How can someone like Lord Li be surrounded by beauties?" King Shou glanced at him and said, "You don't understand. This is called doing the opposite. It's an even more brilliant method. I think Commander Shangguan will fall soon." Zhang Chun shook his head again and sighed. "He is still too young. He doesn't know how good a woman is and mistook a girl for a treasure. Isn't Commander Mei more charming than Commander Shangguan?" Early in the morning when he was reading through the reports, Li Mu didn't see Shangguan Li. Some women were beautiful and had beautiful thoughts. Li Mu couldn't even take care of his own family matters, so how could he have any thoughts about her? He was reading a few reports when suddenly, footsteps came from outside the hall. Shangguan Li walked in with a bowl in her hand. She put the bowl in front of Li Mu and said, "This is back to you." Li Mu looked at the black thing in the bowl and raised his head to look at her and asked, "Is this what I gave you? Even if I gave it to Xianxia wouldn't eat it." Shangguan Li took a look at the bowl, picked it up and left silently. Not long after, a busy figure appeared in the imperial kitchen. The imperial chefs didn't know what was going on. Commander Shangguan, who was of noble status, actually began to practice her cooking skills. This caused countless people to speculate. Many people thought that she should have someone she liked. A gentleman would die for someone who understood him, and a woman would dress up for someone who liked her. It made sense that Commander Shangguan, who only knew how to fight and kill, would practice the skills that ordinary women should have for someone she liked. In the Changle Palace, Li Mu put down the report in his hand. He breathed out a mouthful of turbid air and stretched his body. Recently, all kinds of things were developing according to his plan. With the participation of the 5 Taoist sects and the aristocratic families of the southern countries, the operation of the wishing lane was completely on the right track. It became the largest cultivation market on the Zhou continent, attracting cultivators from all over the world. The imperial court profited greatly from the market. The treasury was quickly filled, and they could attract more and more powerful worshippers. There was also good news from Yingzhou. The southern army found several mineral veins in the miasma of Yingzhou, including a small spiritual jade mine. They didn't need much help from the imperial court. They could be self-sufficient and even subsidize the imperial court. In the Shen kingdom, Zhou Zhong replaced the royal family of the Shen kingdom with iron and blood. Aragu, who was born a pariah, became the nominal emperor of the Shen kingdom. Although there was fierce opposition from the nobles, under the strong suppression of Xianghu and the 3 sects, the voices of opposition in the country disappeared without a trace. As for the sects that actually controlled the various states, there were no top-level powerhouses in them. After several transcendent powerhouses came to visit, they could only choose to submit. In the imperial palace, in the ancestral temple of the Great Zhou, there was a bronze cauldron. Inside the cauldron, there was a thick golden line that extended to the giant cauldron in the center of the ancestral temple. The golden dragon in the giant cauldron was much stronger than when Li Mu first saw it. The golden light on its body was even more dazzling. Only the dozens of scales on its tail were slightly dimmer. When these scales completely turned from dark gold to gold, it would be the time when the Emperor Qi matured. Li Mu walked out of the ancestral temple. Before he reached the Changle Palace, there was a sudden surge of aura from one of the palaces in the palace. Li Mu looked at the palace, and a trace of joy appeared on his face. His figure flashed, and he was already in front of the palace. Mr. Mei walked out of the palace. His aura was restrained, and he looked a few years younger. Li Mu clasped his hands and said with a smile, "Congratulations, Sister Mei." The Empress and Shangguanli appeared at the same time. Shangguanli looked at Mr. Mei and couldn't help but walk forward. She pinched his face and exclaimed, "Why can you become younger after breaking through?" Chapter 569. It wasn't that Mr. Mei became younger when he broke through the realm. It was just that every time he broke through the realm, his body and primordial spirit would undergo a sublimation. In the process of breaking through, her skin became more delicate, so she looked younger. When Shangguanli broke through, her body also underwent such changes. However, she was young, so the changes didn't seem to be big. Even Mr. Mei had broken through. He wondered how Lu Hanyan and Li Qing were doing in Mount Baiyun. Li Mu planned to ask Xianxia, but the sound transmission magic instrument from Fulu School vibrated on its own. In the imperial kitchen, Shangguanli was carefully boiling a bowl of soup. Mr. Mei walked in and asked, "Ali, what are you doing?" Shangguanli added some spices and said angrily, "Can't you see? I'm spooning." Mr. Mei asked curiously, "When did you become interested in these things?" Shangguanli said lightly, "Recently." Mr. Mei picked up a spoon and reached for the bowl. Shangguanli hit the back of his hand. Shanghai Li said, "If you want to eat, make it yourself. It's not for you." Mr. Mei asked curiously, "Then who is it for? Is it for His Majesty?" Then she denied this conjecture. If it was given to His Majesty, Ali would definitely be happy, and not have this expression of someone who owed her a huge debt, as if she wanted to spit in the soup. She thought for a moment and asked suspiciously, "Is it for Li Mu?" Shangguanli hated Li Mu so much that her teeth itched. Not only did he take His Majesty away from her, but he also treated her like that. However, she couldn't tell Sister Mei about this, even if she was one of the closest people to her. Her expression was calm as she said indifferently, "It's nothing. The reason why we were able to break through was because of him. I originally wanted to return the favor and thank him, but he didn't seem to lack anything, so I cooked for him as a token of my appreciation." Lord Mei thought for a moment before nodding. "That makes sense. Then shouldn't I thank him as well? But how should I thank him?" By the time Shangguanli finished preparing the soup and arrived at Changle Palace with Mr. Mei, Li Mu had already left. Mr. Mei looked around, walked to the front of the hall, and whispered to Zhou Yi, "Your Majesty, where is Li Mu?" Zhou Yi's tone was somewhat resentful as he said, "His wife has made a breakthrough in her cultivation and returned to Mount Baiyun." Mr. Mei looked at Queen in surprise. When Li Mu left Fairy's capital in the past, she was not happy, but she was more reluctant to part with him. This time, however, she was more upset. She was sure that something must have happened while she was in seclusion. When she was patrolling the palace with Shangguan Li, she asked, "Did something happen between your majesty and Li Mu?" Shangguan Li raised her eyebrows. She pretended to be calm and asked, "What happened?" Mr. May thought for a moment and said, "I don't know why, but I feel that your majesty is a bit strange." "Not only your majesty, but you are also very strange." Shangguan Li shook her head and said, "You're being paranoid. You're overthinking it." Mount Baiyun. Li Mu had just received the news from Xianxia and rushed back as soon as possible. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing successfully made a breakthrough in their cultivation on the same day and entered the Dongxian realm. Within 10 years, the ancestral temple had produced 2 strands of Emperor's Qi. They had hopes of reaching the Transcendence realm. During this time, thanks to the endless supply of pills, many low-level disciples of the school had made breakthroughs in their cultivation. The overall strength of the Fu Lu school had quietly risen to a new level. Li Mu took them back to his ancestral home in Yangqiu County to stay for a few days and reminisce about the past. Then, he took them to various parts of the Zhou continent. They left their traces in each of the 36 counties of the Great Zhou. They watched the sunrise in Yuntai County, watched the sunset in Hanyang County, skied on the snowy mountains in Jianghu County, and rode horses on the grasslands in Yantai County. They experienced all the infinite sceneries of the Great Zhou. Eastern Sea. Yingzhou. On the east coast of Yingzhou, 3 streaks of light slowly flew over from the sea. These days, Li Mu took the 2 girls to experience the underwater world. They happened to be in Yingzhou, so they decided to go to Yingzhou to have a look. Although Yingzhou was large, it was not suitable for humans to live in. There were many monsters and poisonous insects. Apart from a few natives, there were no countries here. The headquarters of the Corpse sect and the research organization of the School of Moism led by Mo Li were both in the hinterland of Yingzhou. Li Mu and the other 2 descended from the sky. When they approached a seemingly ordinary mountain, a few thick pillars of white light suddenly flew out from the mountain. The white light was extremely fast and carried with it a destructive force. If a transcendent realm cultivator was hit by this attack, they would probably die on the spot. Li Mu waved his hand to dispel these attacks. A few people flew out from the mountain. "Lord Li. Stop the attack, it's Lord Li." They flew to Li Mu and bowed. "Greetings, Lord Li." Li Mu landed in the middle of the mountain and saw a row of cannons extending outwards. The white light just now came from this row of cannons. Mo Li hurriedly walked over and cupped his fists towards Li Mu. "This is a no-fly zone. These mechanisms have arrays that automatically sense mana fluctuations. Once they discover an intruder, they will attack. Please don't take offense, Lord Li." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "It's fine." The Mahist clan was indeed a genius in the field of mechanisms. Using this artifact to guard the city was much more suitable than using humans. The formation would automatically sense the intruder and launch an indiscriminate attack. Even if it was unable to kill the intruder, it would be able to raise the alarm immediately. Although they could not threaten cultivators of the 5th realm and above, killing a 4th realm cultivator was only a matter of 1 cannon. If the army was equipped with these things on a large scale, they would become a nightmare for the low-level cultivators of the enemy forces. Li Mu said to Mo Li, "What other mechanisms do you have? Let me see them." As the successor of the School of Moism, Mo Li knew the complete art of mechanisms. In the past, because he lacked manpower and financial resources, he could not display the School of Moism's mechanisms. Now that he had the support of the Great Zhou, he could turn many powerful mechanisms from blueprints into reality in a short time. The self-defense cannon that Li Mu had seen was only one of them. Referring to Li Mu's suggestion, he had also successfully developed another mechanism. This mechanism was very similar to modern tanks in appearance. There was a formation carved at the bottom and it could be used on land and in the air. The entire mechanism was made from the hard materials used to forge artifacts. Although the cost of production was high, its defense was extremely strong. Even a 6th realm cultivator would not be able to break through it in a short time. As long as a 3rd realm cultivator controlled it simply and filled it with spiritual jades, it could become a killing machine. It only required 1 spiritual jade to kill low-level cultivators. It was also a fatal threat to 5th realm cultivators. Just from the price, The materials of a single mechanical tank could be used to forge many artifacts. If it were not for the Great Zhou's wealth, they would not be able to afford to mass-produce it. However, the advantages of this mechanism were also irreplaceable. It had the attack power of the fifth realm and above. As long as it had spiritual jades, it would never run out of mana. Its defense was extremely strong and its attack power was extremely high. If there were tens of thousands of these mechanisms, they could raze a small country to the ground in an instant. They could also make Xuanzong disappear from the East Sea. Other than this kind of attack mechanism, the Mahis sect also had some small auxiliary mechanisms. Their voice transmission Dharma artifacts were unique. A mother box could have countless child boxes. The mother box could establish a connection with the child boxes. This way, Li Mu did not need to bring so many voice transmission Dharma artifacts. He only needed to hold a mother box and he could easily communicate with the person who had the child boxes. Li Mu asked Mo Li to prepare dozens of child boxes for him. He gave one to Lu Hanyan and one to Li Qing. When he returned, he would give one each to Wan Wan, Xiaobai, Sister Mei, and Ali. After that, he imprinted the Fulu, formation, and artifact forging knowledge that Mo Li might use in a jade scroll. If he could comprehend it, there was still the possibility of improvement in the Mahis sect's mechanical arts. After leaving Yingzhou, Li Mu went to the fairies' capital with them. At the same time, in the demon nation of Life State, Hu Jiu led a few subordinates and floated on top of a mountain. She could not help but shiver when she saw the tragic situation below. In a cave abode on the mountain, a small demon clan was slaughtered. The demon nation was a place where the strong preyed on the weak. This kind of thing happened from time to time. However, since these small demon clans submitted to the Thousand Fox Nation, no matter how powerful the demon clans in the demon nation were, they did not dare to do anything to them. What was even more frightening was that this demon clan had died in a very strange way. There were no wounds on their bodies, but the blood in their bodies had been sucked dry. There was not a single drop left. They had all turned into dried corpses. There was still a look of horror on their faces. That was not all. Not only this small demon clan, there was not a single living thing within a 10-mile radius of the mountain. Whether it was the birds, the beasts, or the small demons in the mountain, they all seemed to have turned into mummified corpses at the same time. The mountain was dead silent. Hu Jiu and the other demons could even hear their own breathing. An extremely strange atmosphere was spreading among them. Chapter 570. In the past month, the entire Yao nation was shrouded in a horrifying atmosphere. In the territories of Jianghu Nation, Tianlang Nation, Shen Snake Tribe, and Flying Bear Tribe, a number of shocking incidents happened. More than a dozen small and medium-sized Yao tribes were slaughtered overnight. These demon clan members had died a horrible death. All the blood in their bodies had been sucked dry, leaving behind only withered demon clan corpses. What was even more terrifying was that not only were the demon clan members slaughtered, but even the demon clan members nearby that did not have any intelligence were also sucked dry. This incident caused the entire Yao nation to panic. Jianghu Nation, in the cave abode on the highest peak. The Blue Wolf King's face was pale as he muttered, "Demonic path, it must be the demonic path. This is the method of the demonic path." That elder of the demonic path did the same to heal himself. The Lord of Illusions narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "The elders of the sage sect are inhumane. We can't let this go on. Absorbing so much blood essence at once, I'm afraid someone is using it to cultivate the demonic art. If we let him go, he will become stronger and more difficult to deal with." The Blue Wolf King said, "If it's really those people, we're no match for them. If we want to kill an elder of the sage sect, I'm afraid we'll have to call that bear and that snake together." The Lord of Illusions looked out of the cave abode and said, "Looks like it's time to go to Tianshan Mountain and the Snake Swamp." In the extreme north of the Yao Nation, on an ice field. The vast northern territory of the Shang continent was the territory of the Tianshan Bear tribe. The climate here was extremely cold, and the land was covered in snow all year round. Stepping into the northern ice field, all one could see was white. At this moment, there was a glaring red on one of the ice fields. A few white bears fell on the ice, their blood soaking a large area of the ice beneath them. The blood was still spreading in all directions, and the few white bears had long lost their vitality. A sinister human youth in a red robe floated in the air. Looking at the blood on the ice, he licked the blood at the corner of his mouth and whispered, "The blood of a familiar expert." He took a deep breath, and the blood under the ice gathered toward him, forming a river of blood that merged into his body. The young man shuddered. His aura grew stronger, and his face regained some color. The white bears on the ice had all turned into shriveled corpses. The young man looked at the abnormally strong corpse of a giant bear. With a wave of his hand, the bear corpse disappeared. He muttered, "When old Five wakes up, it wouldn't be a bad idea to refine her into a demonic corpse." After collecting the bear carcass, he was about to leave when a white light suddenly whizzed towards him from the north. The white light carried a powerful aura. Before it even arrived, an earth-shattering roar could be heard. "Who killed my son?" The young man looked in that direction, and the corners of his mouth curled up. "After killing the little one, the big one has come." He was only at the 6th level of cultivation, but he showed no fear in the face of an aura that was much more powerful than his own. A foul river of blood surged out from his body once more, blotting out the sky as it rushed towards the figure in the distance. The river of blood and the white light collided, and a powerful wave of mana exploded. The ice plains within a radius of dozens of miles immediately collapsed, forming countless icicles that pierced towards the red-robed young man. The icicles almost filled the void, and the young man had nowhere to hide. His body suddenly turned into a pool of blood, allowing the icicles to pass through him. Then, he turned into a streak of blood light and merged into the river of blood in the distance. As the young man's body merged into the river of blood began to surge violently, as if it was boiling. In an instant, it enveloped the giant in the white light, forming a constantly shrinking ball of blood. The ball of blood scurried around in the air above the ice plains, and at the same time, it was also constantly shrinking. The surface of the ball of blood surged even more violently, and from within came roars of shock and panic. "What the hell are you?" Within the ball of blood, the young man's voice was sinister. "To be able to contribute blood essence to this lord, your death is not without value." With that, the ball of blood suddenly fell silent for a moment, and then it began to expand violently. In the end, it exploded with a bang, and a streak of white light escaped, shooting off into the distance. The young man returned to his original form, but his face was rather pale. He licked the blood from the corner of his mouth and said softly, "It's been too long since I've fought. I've underestimated these juniors." His aura was much weaker than before, so he did not continue to pursue. Instead, he turned into a streak of blood-red light and disappeared in the opposite direction of the white light. A day later, on Sky Mountain, within a huge ice cave, the 9-Heaven Snake King stared at a burly man with a withered aura. He said in shock, "What? Even you were no match for that person?" The White Bear King still had lingering fear. He said, "If I hadn't self-destructed the artifact I'd nurtured for 60 years to escape, I probably would have died at the hands of that human." The Blue Wolf Demon King asked, "Which demonic Tao transcending elder injured you?" The White Bear King shook his head. He said, "Not a demonic elder. That person was only at the 6th level." The Blue Wolf King was in disbelief. He blurted out, "Impossible. How could a 6th level almost kill you? You think everyone is like that? That lord?" The White Bear King said seriously, "I'm sure he's only at the 6th level, but his divine art is too strange. I've never seen such a strange and terrifying divine art before. Where did this person come from? How come I've never heard of him before?" The Blue Wolf King asked suspiciously, "Is it not demonic?" "It's demonic." The Heaven Lord of Illusions was silent for a moment. He then said slowly, "I've read the history of the demon sect. Every few hundred or thousand years, a few powerful cultivators would suddenly appear in the demon sect. They were so powerful that they could kill and transcend through Dongxian. The divine art that the human bear mountain mentioned was also recorded in the ancient records. Every 300 or 400 years, a powerful cultivator would appear who was good at using blood arts. It's been more than 400 years since the last powerful cultivator died." The 9-Heaven Snake King said, "If it's demonic, then things are even more troublesome. This person has the power to kill us now. When his demonic arts are perfected and his cultivation improves, even if we work together, we might not be his match. At that time, even if we don't go to him, he'll come to us." The powerful cultivators of the Demon Nation all had serious expressions. The Demon Nation had once been at odds with the Great Zhou, but only a portion of the demon forces were involved. The civil strife that followed was just a war between the Celestial Wolf Tribe and the Thousand Fox Tribe. However, the situation now was different. Small demon clans had been destroyed under the four major forces. The mastermind's hand had already reached out to the White Bear King. If they ignored it, this would become the greatest catastrophe in the demon nation in the past few hundred years. The Heaven Lord of Myriad Illusions swept his gaze across the crowd and said, "Everyone is well aware of the situation in the demon country. I hope that in the coming days, we can put aside our past grudges and join forces to deal with our common enemy." The White Bear King and the Nine Heaven Snake King looked at each other and nodded slowly. Among the four great factions of the demonic kingdom, the Wolf Clan and the Fox Clan had somehow formed an alliance. Even though there had always been territorial disputes and conflicts of interest between them, for now, they had a common enemy. Furthermore, it was an extremely powerful enemy. They had to work together to survive the demon nation's crisis. After a short secret discussion, the four major forces of the demon nation officially formed an alliance. The Heaven Lord of Illusions looked at the weak White Bear King and took out a bottle of pills. He poured out a pill and threw it to the White Bear King, saying, "There might be a fierce battle ahead. Take this pill and your injuries will recover." As the Heaven Lord of Illusions opened the jade bottle, the other three demon kings immediately smelled a medicinal fragrance. Judging from the fragrance, this pill was definitely not an ordinary one. Pills that could be effective on seventh realms were already very precious. Furthermore, the demon race was not good at refining pills. Such pills were even harder to find in the demon nation. The Heaven Lord of Illusions actually had an entire bottle, which made the other demons envious. The White Bear King accepted the pill and cupped his fists, saying, "Thank you, Brother Illusions. I wonder how much this pill costs. I will pay you with spiritual jades." The Heaven Lord of Illusions waved his hand and said proudly, "It's just one pill. It's nothing. My son-in-law gave me several bottles. I won't be able to finish them all in a short time." The White Bear King said enviously, "Brother Illusions has found a good son-in-law. It's a pity that my daughters don't have this fate." The Green Wolf King glanced at him and said, "Forget about your daughters. They're all big and burly. Which human would like them? But those girls from the Jotian clan know how to pester people. That man is very lecherous. Jotian, you might as well." The Heaven Lord of Illusions' face darkened and said coldly, "Green Demon, I advise you to mind your own business." Chapter 571. Baiyun Mountain. Li Mu, Lu Hanyan, and Li Qing had just spent a beautiful and shameless time together. They stayed in Shendu for a few days before returning to the ancestral court. Some ancient lost cultivation techniques could be cultivated much faster than Taoism's guided qi refinement. Li Mu had already cultivated Ao Qing's secret dual cultivation technique for some time. Often, one night was equivalent to 10 days of qi refinement. Ao Qing was able to cultivate to the 9th realm because of his cultivation technique. It was also inseparable from his huge harem. This cultivation technique was originally very suitable for the dragon race. It could not only satisfy the dragon's lustful physiological needs, but it was also a top-notch cultivation technique. Speaking of which, it seemed like it was tailor-made for Li Mu. However, in these 2 days, Li Mu could cultivate qi refinement in an honest manner. After Lu Hanyan and Li Qing's cultivation broke through, their status was promoted from core disciples to first seats. In the 6 sects, any disciple whose cultivation reached Dongxian could occupy a peak independently and recruit disciples. Yuzhen Zi had already transcended. Baiyun Mountain was left to Lu Hanyan to manage. Li Qing was the head disciple, and her cultivation had reached Dongxian. She also had the qualifications to open a peak. She was originally a disciple of Ziyun Peak. After her promotion, Ziyun Peak's first seat, Yu Quanzi, relinquished his position and completely handed over Ziyun Peak to her. The Talisman Pai sect used to recruit disciples once every 4 years. After taking over the Talisman Pai sect, Li Mu changed this rule. The Talisman Pai sect and the Mysterious sect were on par with each other in terms of high-level combat strength. However, the gap between the 2 sects in terms of low-level disciples was too huge. If the Talisman Pai sect still used the previous rule, it was unknown when they would be able to catch up with the Mysterious sect. Fu Lu School didn't cooperate much with the imperial court in the past. It was difficult to recruit disciples from the common people. Currently, the Fu Lu School had already begun a deep cooperation with the imperial court. Some time ago, Li Mu had asked the empress to select people of suitable age and decent aptitude within the 36 counties, and then have the school contact their families. Being able to join such a cultivation sect was undoubtedly a good thing for ordinary people to completely change their fates. Not only would they be able to learn new skills, but their families would also not have to worry about food and clothing in the future. They might even be able to achieve meteoric success. Very few people would reject such an opportunity. Therefore, during this period of time, there were many new faces in White Cloud Mountain. These people were divided equally among the peaks and were temporarily handed over to the young disciples. They would lead these new disciples onto the path of cultivation. After flying out of the White Cloud Peak, Li Mu arrived at the Purple Cloud Peak. Two female disciples who were chatting immediately stood up straight, puffed out their chests, and said respectfully, "Greetings, Martial Uncle." Li Mu smiled at them and walked toward the Holy Ji Palace. When Li Mu entered the Holy Ji Palace, an older female disciple said to the younger one, "Martial Uncle Ling Jizi is the sect master's junior brother. According to seniority, we should address him as Martial Uncle. Don't get it wrong in the future." The younger female disciple was puzzled, "But I heard that Martial Uncle Ling Jizi is the Taoist companion of the head monk. If that's the case, we should address him as Martial Uncle." The older female disciple was stunned for a moment. Then, she shook her head and said, "You don't have to worry about that. This is the sect. If you see him in the future, just address him as Martial Uncle." The female disciple who had just joined the sect thought for a moment and mumbled, "If that's the case, wouldn't the head monk have to address his Taoist companion as Martial Uncle? That's too strange." Before she could finish, her senior sister knocked her on the head. The older female disciple reprimanded her, "This is White Cloud Mountain, not the secular world. You have to treat the elders of the sect with respect. Don't talk about them casually." The younger female disciple nodded and walked away as if she had been taught a lesson. The older female disciple then mumbled softly, "It's a little strange to not talk about them." 3 days later, a figure flew out of White Cloud Mountain and headed towards the Life Continent's Fey Nation. Li Mu, who had changed his appearance, flew through the air at a steady pace. The current him was definitely a thorn in the side of the fiends. Even though his cultivation had reached Dongxian, he was still far from being invincible. Ignoring the fact that the fiends might have 8th realms, if the Yu and Ming elders were to block his path again, it would be difficult for him to deal with them alone. Therefore, before leaving the Fulu school, he changed his appearance and used a heaven-ranked Fulu to conceal his heavenly secrets. Even high-level experts would not be able to divine his whereabouts. It had been a long time since he saw Huan Ji. Li Qing and Lu Hanyan were busy with the sex matters and did not have the time to bother with him. He decided to stay in the Fey Nation for a few days to prevent Huan Ji from feeling upset. After returning to the Fey Nation, Li Mu acutely sensed that the atmosphere was a little off. In the past, the Fey Nation was filled with demonic energy. Some greater demons did not even bother to conceal their auras. Their auras soared into the sky and could be sensed from far away. However, at this time, Li Mu was flying above the Fey Nation. All he could feel was a deathly stillness. There was not a single strand of demonic energy that soared into the sky. Some lesser demons were doing their best to conceal their demonic energy and were hiding in their caves. The atmosphere was very strange. If there was only one place, then it would be fine. But after flying for 1,000 miles, he had encountered such strange situations all the way. He could not help but feel suspicious. A few hundred miles ahead was the Thousand Fox Nation. Li Mu wanted to increase his speed, but he suddenly sensed an abnormal aura. He sniffed and smelled a faint scent of blood. This blood aura was extremely faint, but it gave Li Mu a very uncomfortable feeling. He was bewildered as he followed the blood aura and finally came to a valley. In the valley, there was a blood lake. The blood lake was surging and countless dead demons were drowning in it. The water and blood in their bodies seemed to have been sucked dry, leaving only withered corpses floating in the blood lake. A young man in a blood-red robe sat cross-legged in the center of the blood lake. Wisps of blood mist rose from the blood lake and were absorbed into his body. Heretical cultivation. This bloody purgatory scene made Li Mu's stomach churn. A thought immediately arose in his mind. There were countless paths of cultivation. There were righteous paths that relied on one's own efforts to cultivate. There were also evil paths that coveted shortcuts and harmed others to benefit oneself. Heretical cultivation was something that everyone had the right to punish. Although this was the Fey Nation and this person was killing demons, This was already the territory of the Thousand Fox Nation. He was killing the demons under Phantom Princess and Li Mu. Just as Li Mu thought of this, the young man sitting cross-legged in the center of the blood lake seemed to have sensed the intruder. His closed eyes suddenly opened. 2 beams of blood-red light shot out from his eyes and headed straight for Li Mu. Li Mu formed a seal with one hand and a silver array appeared in front of him. In the next instant, the blood-red light shot onto the array. The array that Li Mu had formed at the last minute collapsed and the 2 beams of blood-red light also dispersed. The young man in the center of the blood lake slowly stood up and stared at Li Mu with a greedy gaze. He stuck out his scarlet tongue and licked his lips. His voice was soft and feminine. I didn't expect such a powerhouse to come to me. Li Mu looked at the blood-robed young man and his gaze turned serious. This person's aura was around the middle stage of the 6th realm. However, the threat he posed was even greater than the Yu and Ming elders. What shocked him even more was that this person was about the same age as him, but his cultivation level was much higher than his. After all, Li Mu had relied on his own efforts to achieve his current cultivation level. The willpower of countless people in the divine capital, the inheritance of the Dragon King, and the countless opportunities he had encountered during his cultivation journey. How did this person, who was about the same age as him, cultivate to be able to suppress him in terms of cultivation level? The heretical cultivation clearly did not want to let Li Mu go. Before Li Mu could think further, the blood river in the valley had already surged up. The huge waves seemed to want to swallow Li Mu whole. Thousands of sword shadows appeared behind Li Mu and sank into the blood river. Then they exploded. Countless holes appeared in the blood river, but they gathered together in the next instant. The young man's eyes were filled with disdain. Li Mu frowned slightly. He had not fought with the heretical cultivation many times. These heretical supernatural powers were more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. With another thought, a gust of wind blew behind him. The gust of wind mixed with raindrops blew the blood river away. This time, it was the young man's turn to frown. He said in a low voice, "Call the wind and summon the rain. You, a human, know this supernatural power. Those old fogies of the dragon clan did not chase after you." As he muttered to himself, his figure disappeared from where he stood. A blood shadow went straight for Li Mu. The Xianxia sword in Li Mu's hand flashed with countless streaks of lightning as it slashed across the sky. The blood shadow was sliced into 2 halves before quickly fusing back together. The evil cultivator's hands turned into 2 blood blades as they slashed towards Li Mu. Golden light flashed on Li Mu's body and a golden armor appeared. The blood blades slashed at the golden armor. Li Mu's figure retreated quickly, and the blood shadow was also sent flying. In order to avoid exposing his identity, Li Mu did not use the protection of the Dao Bell, nor did he use Ao Qing's spear. He was confident that he could deal with any cultivator of the same level with his supernatural powers. The 2 figures had just separated when they charged at each other again. In the next 15 minutes, the sky was filled with the light of supernatural powers. Mountains collapsed one after another. Monsters and beasts within a radius of dozens of miles all fled. Another 15 minutes later, Li Mu floated in the void and looked at the blood shadow opposite him. His chest rose and fell slightly, but there was a huge wave of emotions in his heart. Sure enough, he could not underestimate anyone in the world. He had fought with the heretical cultivation for so long, but he had not gained the upper hand at all. Not only was this person's supernatural powers strange, causing him to almost lose several times, but what was even more strange was that this person's fighting experience was so rich that it was unbelievable. In close combat, Li Mu could only fight to a draw with him using the fighting formula. In terms of long-range combat, Li Mu had been suppressed from the very beginning. After fighting with this person for half an hour, Li Mu gained a lot of knowledge. Supernatural powers could be used and linked in such a way. Using 2 different kinds of supernatural powers at the same time or in combination had a completely different effect than using them separately. After fighting for a short while, Li Mu realized that this heretical cultivation's fighting experience was far from what he could compare to. If it were not for the fact that he could shrink the distance and move out of the range of the supernatural powers in an instant, he would have been defeated by this person at least 16 times in the fight just now. Li Mu was shocked, and the Blood River ancestor was even more terrified. He had tens of thousands of years of fighting experience, and it was not difficult for him to kill enemies of a higher realm. Yet, he could not take down a 6th realm junior whose cultivation was lower than his. This person was not more than 30 years old, but his cultivation was Dongxian. His fighting experience was so rich that even he felt inferior. He even began to suspect that this person was also reincarnated with the memories of some old monster. Otherwise, the scene before him would be difficult to explain. However, if he was an old monster from thousands of years ago, how could his fighting experience be so rusty? It was unlikely that this kind of contradiction would appear on the same person. Both of them were shocked by each other's strength. They floated in the void hundreds of feet apart, not daring to move. Li Mu took a deep breath, and his gaze gradually returned to normal. Although this person's cultivation was only Dongxian, even a transcendent cultivator would not have an easy time against him. Today, he could not let this heretical cultivation go. Otherwise, for the Yao nation and the Great Zhou, there would always be a huge hidden danger. He had to bring out some of his trump cards. Li Mu stretched out his hand, and with a flash of green light, a long spear appeared in his hand. The moment he saw the long spear, the evil youth could no longer maintain the calm expression on his face. His face was filled with extreme fear, and he cried out, "Sky-piercing spear! Why you're Ao Qing?" When Li Mu heard the name of the Dragon Clan's powerhouse from 8,000 years ago from the heretic practitioner's mouth, the calmness on his face was also broken. He said in shock, "How do you know Ao Qing? What exactly are you?" Chapter 572. Ao Qing had already been dead for 8,000 years. Even the dragon race had forgotten about him. Yet, there was someone who could recognize his weapon and call out his name. As Li Mu thought about this, he felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't know that this spear was originally called Heaven Breaker. When he saw that iconic spear, fear surged from the depths of his memories, causing the nefarious youth to tremble. However, he soon realized something. As he looked at Li Mu, he was overjoyed. He blurted out, "So it's you." Li Mu became even more vigilant. He asked, "Do you know who I am?" The nefarious youth coldly snorted and said, "The future headmaster of the Fulu school, the favored minister of the Empress of the Great Zhou, the imperial advisor and empress of the Thousand Fox Nation. Li Mu, do you think you can hide from me just because you've become a bit uglier?" Li Mu's gaze turned cold. He didn't know anything about this person, but this person was able to accurately identify him. Even his secret relationship with Phantom Princess had been revealed. In this world, the only people who knew him better than he did were those from the demonic path. Li Mu looked at the youth and asked, "Which demonic path elder are you?" The youth stood in the air, his eyes locked onto Li Mu. He said, "Before answering you, should I call you Li Mu or Ao Qing?" Ao Qing had already been dead for almost 10,000 years. Li Mu didn't know why this youth would ask such a question. But, the doubt hidden deep in his eyes couldn't escape the youth's notice. The nefarious youth revealed a look of understanding. He let out a sigh of relief and muttered, "It's not Ao Qing." The person in front of him gave him a very strange feeling. Li Mu had never encountered such an opponent before. He grasped his spear and thrust it forward. The void fluctuated and Li Mu's spear-wielding figure appeared behind the nefarious youth, thrusting his spear towards his back. The youth's body suddenly turned into a mass of blood. As the spear pierced through, a portion of the blood evaporated, but the youth's figure reformed not too far away. Azure light and blood shadows crisscrossed in the sky. Even with the sky-piercing spear in hand, Li Mu was still unable to gain the slightest advantage. At this moment, the mysteries in his heart were piling up one after another. Although the young man in front of him was young, his fighting experience was frighteningly rich. Moreover, he could recognize the powerhouse of the Dragon Clan from 8,000 years ago. Could he be an old monster from the ancient times? As soon as this idea appeared, it was rejected by Li Mu. No matter how strong a cultivator was, they couldn't escape the ravages of time and the sanctions of their lifespans. The old monsters of that time couldn't have lived until now. Furthermore, if this person was really an old monster that had lived since the Antiquity Age, he would not only have the cultivation of Dongxian. At this moment, Li Mu's first thought was Emperor Bai. Before his lifespan ended, he had extracted his memories and passed them on for 3,000 years. To a certain extent, his life had also been extended. If this person was a powerhouse from the same era as Ao Qing, he had extracted his memories and left them to fuse with another person or pass them on again and again, then everything that happened today could be explained. including the fact that he recognized the sky-piercing spear. His fighting experience was unbelievably rich. With nearly 10,000 years of accumulation, how could he not be rich? The sinister young man's hands turned into two blood blades and easily neutralized Li Mu's attack. With a faint smile on his face, he said, "I've searched high and low for something, only to find it without any effort. The successor of Ao Qing. It's fate that you'll die in my hands today. Hand over the tomes of arcane on you as soon as possible, and I'll give you a dignified death." Li Mu looked at him and said indifferently, "Even if you're an old monster from 10,000 years ago, you're only in the Dongxian realm now. You're not qualified to kill me now." The sinister young man grinned and said slowly, "Junior, you'll soon know whether I'm qualified or not." He threw out 4 black lotuses. The black lotuses flew in 4 directions and connected to each other with a black light, confining this space. Li Mu knew that this was to prevent him from escaping. This old monster was too strong and had too much experience. He was more difficult to deal with than anyone Li Mu had ever fought. By confining the space in advance, it meant that he was not afraid of any of Li Mu's trump cards. This was just to prevent him from escaping. Following the imprisonment of space, a curtain of blood rose from behind the evil-looking youth. The thick smell of blood was nauseating. At the same time, Li Mu discovered that the blood in the youth's body was showing signs of leaking out of his body. Li Mu originally thought that with his current strength, it would be easy for him to deal with a 6th realm heretical cultivation cultivator. However, there was a slight change in the situation now. If he really fought with him to the death, even if he could get rid of him, Li Mu would definitely be seriously injured or even die together with him. He looked at the blood shadow that was attacking him again. Without hesitation, an ancient bow appeared in his hand. With the appearance of the sun-shooting bow, the blood shadow that was attacking him stopped abruptly. Then, he heard a voice that was even more shocked and terrified than when he saw the sky split a spear. "Sun-shooting bow. Why is Ao Xian's sun-shooting bow in your hands too?" The blood shadow quickly retreated when he saw the sun-shooting bow. However, before he could escape, he had to break free from the confinement of this space, which slowed him down for a moment. In just a moment, a golden arrow suddenly arrived, stirring up a burst of spatial turbulence. South Sea. On an island shrouded in black fog. At the top of the tower, a soul kneeled in front of a stone coffin and said respectfully, "Third ancestor, a month ago, for some reason, the soul page enshrined in the Hall of Souls suddenly vibrated non-stop. I felt that there might be a reason behind it, so I immediately came here to report." The ghostly fire in the eyes of the skinny old man that was as thin as a skeleton trembled. He immediately said, "Feng Yi." An old man that was waiting at the side immediately went forward and said, "Third ancestor, please give your orders." The skeletal old man said, "The soul page is a copy of the Ghost Dao Heavenly Book. The vibration of the soul page means that the Ghost Dao Heavenly Book is in the ghost realm of Yudu. I order you to immediately head to the ghost realm and bring that heavenly book back." Feng Yi bowed and said, "Yes." After saying that, he looked at the soul shadow beside him and said, "King Qingguang, let's go." After they left, the lid of another stone coffin beside the skeletal old man suddenly opened, and a woman's voice came from within. "After 500 years, the Ghost Dao Heavenly Book has finally appeared. Aren't you going to make a trip personally?" The skeletal old man clutched his chest and said, "Tian Jizi won't allow me to set foot on the continent. Although this person's Dao skills aren't strong, his arithmetic is one of the most difficult opponents I've met in the past few thousand years." The woman said leisurely, "All these years, many 9th realm cultivators have died in our hands. Now, a mere 8th realm cultivator is enough to make you so fearful." The skeletal old man said indifferently, "Today is different from the past. In the past, it was easy to advance to the 9th realm. Now, I've exhausted my lifespan and have only just stepped into the 8th realm. If I still can't find that door, in a few hundred years, when my lifespan is exhausted, I'm afraid I'll be stuck at the 7th realm." The woman thought about it and said, "It's a heavenly book after all. Send a message to Blood River." The skeletal old man said, "Blood River is in the demon country. He needs to transcend as soon as possible. As long as he succeeds in breaking through, he will be invincible below Dao integration. When that time comes, it will be the day we make a move on the Dao sect." The woman was silent for a moment before asking, "Will he encounter any accidents in the demon country alone? In these 10,000 years, memories have been passed down through reincarnation. Of the dozens of senior and junior brothers in the sect, only the few of us are left. The skeletal old man's voice was steady as he said, "Don't worry. With his current abilities, as long as he doesn't meet Tianjizi, he can deal with any situation. It won't be a big problem for him to be alone in the demon country." As his voice fell, a jade talisman hanging on the wall of the pagoda suddenly shattered. Chapter 573. In the Demon Nation, the nameless mountain range was silent. Li Mu held the sun-shooting bow in one hand and the sky-splitting spear in the other. He slowly descended from the void and frantically absorbed the surrounding spiritual energy to recover his spiritual power. The sun-shooting bow had once killed the 7th Realm Hahuan sect Grand Elder with a single arrow, causing his body and soul to be unable to escape. However, it was still unable to kill the evil youth with a single arrow. Of course, the price of receiving the arrow was the destruction of his physical body. His primordial spirit was severely injured and on the verge of dissipating. It was directly destroyed by Li Mu's next spear. In the void, countless light spots were slowly dissipating. Those were the primordial spirit and memory fragments of this person. Li Mu's palm released a suction force that sucked in the light spots. Eventually, they formed a light ball the size of a thumb. He scanned it with his spiritual consciousness and then fell into a long period of contemplation. 4 ancestors of diabolism, Blood River. His guess was not wrong. The youth was indeed a 10,000-year-old monster. What was different from Emperor Bai was that he had passed down his memories over and over again. He had already passed down his memories dozens of times. Not only him, but there were also a few ancestors of diabolism who were using the same method to pass down their memories. 10,000 years ago, their cultivation had reached the 9th realm. When they started cultivating again, everything was familiar. As long as they had enough resources, they could cultivate to the upper 3 realms in a short period of time, or even return to the peak. Although Li Mu had always felt that such a reincarnation was actually not the original life, and that ancestor Blood River had already died 10,000 years ago, to the youth who only had Blood River's memories, he was Blood River. This philosophical question could not be answered in a short period of time. Of course, such a legacy was not without its risks. If one of the inheritors of their memories died unexpectedly and their memories dissipated, they would no longer have the chance to pass down their memories. Just like Blood River today, he died under the sun-shooting bow and the sky-splitting spear. In the future, diabolism would no longer have ancestor Blood River. From Blood River's remnant memories, Li Mu learned that 10,000 years ago, there were dozens of diabolism people who used this method to pass down their memories. But now, there were less than 10 people left. Most of the others had fallen at the hands of experts of a certain era. Among them, the owner of the sky-piercing spear, Ao Qing, and the owner of the sun-shooting bow, Ao Xian, had both killed such demonic inheritors before. That was why they were so terrified and shocked when they saw these 2 weapons at the Blood River. Li Mu was slightly moved. In fact, it wasn't just the demonic path. Righteous path cultivators could also use this method to continue their lineage. But on the other hand, in order to find the owner of the memories, one would have to erase their original memories. This was not something that the righteous path would do. On the other hand, memories could be passed on, but cultivation could not. Even if the previous owner was a cultivator at the 9th realm and placed his memories on an infant, he would still have to start cultivating as a mortal. The process of cultivation was extremely dry and tedious. No matter how strong a person's mind was, it would still be very difficult for them to endure the torment over and over again. In Blood River's memories, there were several demonic path powerhouses who were unable to endure this endless torment and committed suicide in the process of passing down their legacies. Thus, the powerhouses of the demonic path that were a step ahead of the others would look for some special physiques suitable for cultivation. They would spend a massive amount of resources to raise them to a certain level of cultivation and then erase their memories. At this time, they were the best memory hosts. Blood River's body was a genius with a special physique. It was very suitable for him to cultivate an ancient demonic art. Compared to the demonic path, the seniors of the righteous path would also choose to leave behind their memories before they died. But this was not for the sake of seizing the bodies of their juniors, but for them to comprehend and cultivate. Li Mu let out a light breath. Before Blood River died, his memories were already fragmented and fragmented. What he could gather wasn't much. Besides this, he only knew that the demonic path had been willing to endure the loneliness of 10,000 years ago. Generation after generation of great perseverance powerhouses had reincarnated. The reason they did this was because they were looking for a door. A door. Li Mu recalled the illusory door that appeared after he overlapped the heavenly books. For the past 10,000 years, the demonic path had never stopped searching for the heavenly books. Could it be for this door? They had dominated the 10 continents for 10,000 years. The number of heavenly books in their hands was probably no less than Li Mu's. At this time, Li Mu was also certain that the demonic path did indeed have an 8th realm powerhouse. The demonic path Holy Sect's headquarters was in the depths of the South Sea. Although he wanted to attack the demonic path's headquarters and snatch back the heavenly books to see what was behind the door, he obviously didn't have the strength to do so. In this world, the only 2 known 8th realm powerhouses were his enemies. Li Mu sighed inwardly. He collected his thoughts and flew in the direction of the Thousand Fox Nation. At this time, above the South Sea, 2 old figures stood in the air. The flames in the skeletal old man's eyes flickered violently. He gritted his teeth and asked, "Divine Predictor, I won't set foot on the Zoo continent this time, but you still want to stop me?" Divine Predictor looked at him and calmly said, "If this old man doesn't die, don't even think about leaving the South Sea to harm the world." Not long after, huge waves rolled up above the South Sea. The fishermen on the coast all climbed up the mountains to hide. The aquatic creatures in the sea also swam deeper with all their might. Li Mu was completely unaware of all this. He descended from the sky and landed on the square in front of the Thousand Fox Nation's imperial palace. Then, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He sensed several extremely powerful demonic auras in the imperial palace. One of them was the Myriad Illusion Lord, another was the Blue Wolf King, and the other 2 were also 7th realm powerhouses. Moreover, the auras of these 4 demons were somewhat unstable. They were obviously injured. Li Mu didn't have time to pay attention to them. He looked ahead and saw a familiar aura quickly approaching him. In the imperial palace's main hall, the Blue Wolf King's face was still a little frightened. He said in a trembling voice, "What the hell is he?" Ever since the 4 great factions formed an alliance, the 4 7th realm demons worked together to patrol the Yao nation. They wanted to find the culprit behind the annihilation of countless demon tribes. However, they didn't expect that person to be able to play the 4 7th realm demons like a fool with his 6th realm cultivation. Once the 4 of them separated, he would definitely find them and defeat them one by one. Once the 4 of them gathered together, that person would avoid battle and turn to slaughter the small and medium-sized demon tribes. During this period, he was getting stronger almost every day. It wouldn't be long before he could completely threaten the 4 of them. The 9-Heaven Snake King thought for a moment and said in a low voice, "If it really doesn't work, we can only gather the 4 of us and guard the mountain gate." The White Bear King asked, "What about the small and medium-sized demon tribes other than the 4 clans?" The 9-Heaven Snake King shook his head and said, "We can't care about that now." The Myriad Illusion Lord, who hadn't spoken for a long time, said, "It's useless. You all can see that the demonic art he cultivates absorbs the essence and blood of others to become stronger. If we let him wreak havoc in the Yao nation, it won't be long before we're no match for him even if we join forces." The current situation in the Yao nation was still within their range of control. If they waited until the heretical cultivation grew to a certain level, it would be out of their control. The Green Wolf King hesitated for a long time and murmured, "Why don't we ask that lord for help?" Footsteps came from outside the hall. Illusion Princess walked in with Li Mu intimately. Li Mu looked at everyone and asked, "What are you all talking about?" The Myriad Illusion Lord coughed lightly and said, "My dear son-in-law, you may not know this, but recently, a vicious heretical cultivation appeared in the Yao nation. The 4 of us joined forces but couldn't capture him." Li Mu was caught off guard when the Myriad Illusion Lord called him, "my dear son-in-law." He had only been with Illusion Princess since he came to the Yao nation. He didn't speak much with the Myriad Illusion Lord and wasn't so familiar with him. However, in front of so many people, even if Li Mu didn't consider him, he had to consider Illusion Princess. Moreover, the Myriad Illusion Lord called him "my dear son-in-law," was based on the truth, so he tacitly agreed to it. He reached out his hand and gently touched the void. A shadow appeared in front of the Myriad Illusion Lord and the others. Li Mu asked, "Is it this person?" The Myriad Illusion Lord said in shock, "My dear son-in-law, you've seen him?" Li Mu nodded slightly and said casually, "On the way to the Yao nation, I happened to see this heretical cultivation slaughtering innocent demons. I killed him in passing to prevent him from harming the 1,000 Fox Nation in the future. Killed. In passing. The 4 demons in the hall, including the myriad illusion lord, were all stunned. Although the heretical cultivation was only at the 6th realm, even they, who were at the 7th realm, had almost died in his hands. How could he be killed so easily? If Li Mu could kill that evil youth, wouldn't he have the ability to kill them as well? Li Mu continued, this person's cultivation wasn't high, but he was very strong. His mystique was strange and his battle experience was also very rich. I was almost injured by him and spent a lot of effort to kill him. He had a high status in the demon sect. If he died in the Yao Nation, he might attract the revenge of the demon sect. You have to be careful in the Yao Nation. Illusion Princess had already hinted to him countless times. After reminding them, Li Mu and Illusion Princess walked out of the hall and went straight to the harem. Inside the hall, the Green Wolf King's mouth was wide open and didn't close for a long time. That person is really dead? That's impossible. He's only at the 6th realm. That person is invincible at the 6th realm. The myriad illusion lord was the first to come back to his senses. He smiled and said to the others, since my son-in-law said he's dead, then he's dead. Compared to how he killed that person, what's more important is whether we can withstand the revenge of the demon sect. The original temporary alliance of the 4 races was to deal with that heretical cultivation. Now that he was dead, the alliance of the 4 races should be dissolved. However, the myriad illusion lord's worries weren't unfounded. The Green Wolf King's life was still in the hands of others, so of course, he didn't have any objections. The 9-Heaven Snake King and the White Bear King fell into a long silence. The myriad illusion lord looked at them and continued, many things have happened in the Yao Nation in the past 2 years. I believe that you can see that only a unified Yao Nation can gather all forces and resist the calamity together. The 9-Heaven Snake King frowned and said, you want us to bow down to your 1,000 Fox Nation? The myriad illusion lord shook his head and said, we're not bowing down to you. The 4 races will unite, and our territories will remain unchanged. We'll use the power of the 4 races to unify the power of the entire Yao Nation. In the future, we'll discuss the matters of the Yao Nation together. Only the Black Snake Tribe and the Flying Bear Tribe couldn't fight against the demon sect. A complete unification of the Yao Nation's races was a good thing for everyone, especially with the 1,000 Fox Nation behind them. Relying on that man was equivalent to relying on the Great Zhou court. The various Dao sects would instantly gain countless powerful allies. The 9-Heaven Snake King and the White Bear King looked at each other and quickly came to a decision. The 9-Heaven Snake King nodded and said, the myriad illusion lord's words make sense. With the enemy before us, it's time for the Yao Nation to be unified. The White Bear King also said, I also agree with the unification. The myriad illusion lord said meaningfully, since the Yao Nation is to be unified, we must choose a ruler. Who do you think is the most suitable person to take this position? Although the myriad illusion lord asked in a questioning tone, there was no choice in this matter. The 1,000 Fox Nation was currently the dominant power in the Yao Nation. Even if the Black Snake Tribe and the Flying Bear Tribe controlled the Yao Nation, they didn't have the strength to protect the Yao Nation. The entire Yao Nation was now tied to the 1,000 Fox Nation. To be more precise, it was tied to the man behind the Queen of the 1,000 Fox Nation, Phantom Princess. The 9-Heaven Snake King took a deep breath and said helplessly, I think that niece Phantom Princess can take on this heavy responsibility. The myriad illusion lord shook his head and said, her cultivation is too low. I'm afraid she can't take on this responsibility. The 9-Heaven Snake King cursed in his heart. The myriad illusion lord had clearly dug a hole and was waiting for them to jump into it. However, they had no choice but to jump into it. He could only harden his heart and grit his teeth and said, with the accumulation of our 4 tribes over the years, it shouldn't be difficult to push her to the 7th realm. The myriad illusion lord looked troubled and said, I'm sorry. The White Bear King also understood the meaning behind their words and said with a pained heart, it should be so. The Queen of the Yao Nation can't lose to the Queen of the Great Zhou. I suggest that we merge the psychic spirits of the 4 tribes to help the Queen break through. Chapter 574. 1,000 Fox Nation's Main Hall. A golden fox spirit floated above the 10,000 Illusions Lord's head. A golden snake coiled around the 9 Heaven Snake King's arm. A golden wolf and a golden bear each crawled under the feet of the Blue Wolf King and the White Bear King. They weren't big, but they exuded a strange aura. The 4 psychokinesis spirits were quiet on the surface, but they were all looking at each other with greed in their eyes. The 4 demons left behind their psychokinesis spirits, looked at each other, and left the palace hall. The moment they stepped out of the hall, the 4 spirits finally couldn't hold back and pounced on each other. In the past, he spent most of his time with the Empress, Lu Hanyan, and Li Qing. This was a little unfair to Illusion Princess, so Li Mu stayed in Thousand Fox Nation for a while this time. Some strange things happen these days. In the past, Thousand Fox Nation was mostly made up of foxes and small demon tribes that relied on the fox tribe. It was rare to see the wolf tribe, snake tribe, bear tribe, and other demon tribes. These tribes generally relied on the other 3 major demon tribes. However, in recent days, Li Mu often saw the snake tribe, bear tribe, and wolf tribe wandering around the city. To be precise, it was the banshees of these tribes. When Li Mu accompanied Illusion Princess to play in the city, they would encounter a banshee every once in a while. They winked at him and made eyes at him. The beautiful snakes were fine, but the banshees of the bear tribe were all as strong as mountains. When they twisted their bodies, Li Mu was traumatized. Therefore, he simply didn't go out now. When he had nothing to do, he would study the Tao of dual cultivation with Illusion Princess and drink with Fox 6 and Fox 9. Life in the Yao Nation was so pleasant and comfortable. From Fox 6, Li Mu just learned that the Celestial Wolf Nation, the Black Snake Tribe, and the Flying Bear Tribe had decided to form a complete alliance with Thousand Fox Nation. In the future, Thousand Fox Nation would lead and the 4 tribes would discuss important matters together. In other words, Illusion Princess would not only be the queen of Thousand Fox Nation in the future, but also the queen of the Yao Nation. In terms of identity and status, she was already in the same position as the Empress. Although his strength was still slightly lacking, it was only temporary. The overall strength of the Yao Kingdom was not inferior to that of the Great Zhou. In fact, it was even superior. If the Yao Kingdom's queen was only at the 6th realm, she would be inferior to the Empress of the Great Zhou. Therefore, after the 4 clans discussed, they decided to use the power of the Yao Kingdom to push Huan Ji's cultivation to the 7th realm. Her method of promotion was the same as the Empress. The various clans of the Yao Nation had always been fighting over territories and small and medium-sized demon clans. A large part of the reason was their psychokinesis. If it was just the Thousand Fox Nation alone, it might take decades before a spirit of psychokinesis was born that could allow Phantom Princess to advance to the 7th realm. However, if the 4 clans worked together, they would be able to nurture a mature spirit of psychokinesis very quickly. Li Mu was happy to see the unification of the Yao Nation. Including the Yao Nation, the forces he could mobilize now were already very large, but he still lacked an 8th realm ally. When he had the confidence to resist Tianjizi, it would be time for him to return to Xuanzong. In addition, Li Mu also had some thoughts about the demon sect's heavenly tomes. The demon sect must know more about what was behind that door than he did. Those demon cultivators endured loneliness for 10,000 years in order to complete the heavenly tomes. There must be a huge secret hidden within. Li Mu digested Blood River's memories, trying to find some useful information from them. 10,000 years ago, there were many powerful cultivators on the mainland. Although 9th realm cultivators could not be said to be everywhere, it was not rare for more than 10 9th realm cultivators to appear on the mainland at the same time. Blood River had already reincarnated dozens of times. Every time he reincarnated, he would gain hundreds of years of memories. In these memory fragments, Li Mu saw that from 10,000 years ago, as time passed, there were fewer and fewer powerful cultivators on the mainland. Gradually, it was difficult for a 9th realm cultivator to appear. After Emperor Bai, no one else broke through this realm. Thus, 8th realm became the end of cultivation. Today, 3,000 years later, even 8th realm had become a bottleneck that was difficult to break through. No matter how amazing a genius was, they could only stop at 7th realm in their lifetime. Obviously, the spirit chi of heaven and earth was constantly decreasing, and this seemed to be the key to shackling the cultivation of cultivators. The spirit chi of heaven and earth that they relied on for survival seemed to be a non-renewable resource. At this rate, in a few thousand years, perhaps the entire world would no longer have spirit chi, and there would no longer be cultivators. If spirit chi of heaven and earth was really a non-renewable resource, then Li Mu could completely foresee the future of the cultivation world. In addition, Li Mu also found that Blood River was very afraid of Ao Xian. Although Ao Xian's cultivation was only at the peak of 8th realm, in his era, the peak of 8th realm was already the world's top cultivator. The sun-shooting bow in his hand was once a shadow of the demon sect. There were even several 8th realm cultivators who died under this bow. In Blood River's memory, he was extremely afraid of this bow. Li Mu took out the sun-shooting bow and stroked the patterns on the bow. These patterns were like runes, but Li Mu did not recognize any of them. Even in the heavenly tomes of the Fu Lu school, there were no related records. Not only that, after Li Mu comprehended the heavenly tomes of the northern sect, he did not know how this bow was made. Ao Qing's sky-piercing spear was made from a whole piece of meteoric iron. The material of this bow was a mystery, and so was the method of making it and the principle of drawing the bow. The current knowledge system of the cultivation world was unable to explain the existence of this bow. In Blood River's memory, Ao Xian was originally just an ordinary black dragon. One day, he suddenly obtained this bow, and then began his path of becoming the continent's #1 cultivator. Li Mu looked at the bow for a long time, but still could not understand anything. He could only put it away for the time being. At this time, a spiritual snail in the sky suddenly vibrated. Ting Xin and Yin Xin were in seclusion in the East Sea, so it could only be the Empress. Phantom Princess was called by the Lord of Illusions to discuss matters, so she was not by his side for the time being. Li Mu picked up the spiritual snail, and Zhou Yi's lazy voice came from it. "What are you doing?" Hearing her voice, Li Mu could imagine her leaning on the dragon throne in the Chang'e Palace. A smile appeared on his face, and he said, "I'm comprehending the heavenly tomes." In the past, Zhou Yi could always use the excuse of state affairs to talk to Li Mu endlessly. After the two of them really expressed their feelings, she was at a loss. After a long silence she said, "Oh, then you continue to comprehend," Li Mu said, "but I want to talk to Her Majesty now." The Empress's heart was still too conservative. Li Mu knew that in their relationship, he had to maintain the initiative. As expected, after Li Mu took the initiative to express his feelings, she also let go of her reservations and took the initiative to talk to Li Mu about many interesting things in the palace. 2 hours passed quietly, and the Empress and Xianxia went for a walk in the Imperial Garden. Li Mu put away the spiritual snail, and Phantom Princess walked in from the outside. She pouted her red lips and complained, "You're still thinking about Zhou Yi here. When you were in the Great Zhou's Shandu, why didn't you think of talking to me? And I even helped you look out for the heavenly tomes." Li Mu held her hand and let her sit on his lap. He said, "Didn't I come here whenever I was free? In the future, I will come here often to accompany you." Phantom Princess's beautiful eyes lit up, and she immediately said, "You promise?" Li Mu said seriously, "I promise." Although traveling between the Shendu and the Yao Kingdom was a bit tiring, for the sake of his own family's harmony, no matter how tiring it was nothing. After making Phantom Princess happy, Li Mu asked, "What did you say about the heavenly tomes?" Phantom Princess sat up straight and said, "Hu Lu's spy found out that the heavenly tomes have appeared in the Ghost region recently." Chapter 575. According to Li Mu's information, most of the 24 pages of heavenly books were in the hands of him and the demon sect. The demon sect had been plotting for 10,000 years in the 10 continents. Besides the 6 Taoist sects, almost all of the known heavenly books had been obtained by them. The Xin nation's 3 Buddhist sects had their heavenly books stolen long ago. The extinction of hundreds of sects in history seemed to have an inseparable relationship with the heavenly books being stolen by the demon sect. Li Mu had the heavenly books of the 5 Taoist sects, the monster race, the fox race, the dragon race, and the Buddhist heart sect. They had a total of 9 pages. The demon sect had 10,000 years of accumulation, so the number of pages in their hands was no less than his. He and the demon sect had nearly 20 pages of heavenly books. There were very few heavenly books in the outside world, and every page was something that had to be fought for. Li Mu was determined to obtain the page of heavenly book in the ghost realm. If Illusion Princess could obtain this information, then the demon sect must also know. Their sense of smell towards heavenly books was incomparably keen. Not long after Illusion Princess finished speaking, the Empress Spirit Snail vibrated again. Li Mu made a shoe gesture to Illusion Princess. After injecting magic power into the spirit snail, the Empress' voice immediately sounded. The Ju Wei just sent back news that a heavenly book has appeared in the ghost realm. Li has already brought people to investigate. Li Mu. I already know. I'm preparing to set off for the ghost realm. Zhou Yi was silent for a moment. Then she asked, How did you know? Were you with that vixen again? Li Mu was stunned for a moment. In terms of the speed of news, even the Fulu school could not compare to a nation. To be able to receive news earlier than the great Zhou court, it must be the demon nation that was closer to the ghost realm. Illusion Princess could no longer endure. She coldly snorted and said, You only allow him to accompany you, not me. You're so overbearing. If you have the ability, then make him stay by your side forever. You seducing vixen. Haha, I admit that I am a vixen. Someone is clearly the same as me, but she always thinks of herself as the Empress. You. Am I wrong? Seeing Phantom Princess and Queen quarrel with each other, Li Mu tried to talk them out of it several times but to no avail. He could only put on a serious face and shouted, Are you guys done? Huan Ji secretly looked at Li Mu. Seeing that he was really angry, she immediately lowered her head and stopped talking. On the other side of the spirit snail, the Empress also fell silent. Li Mu continued, One is the Empress of the Great Zhou, and the other is the Queen of the 10,000 Demons. They don't even see each other, yet they're arguing with each other across the spiritual snail. What a scandal! Phantom Princess is not allowed to stir up trouble, and His Majesty is not allowed to target her. Otherwise, I'll return to Mount Baiyun and cultivate in seclusion. The first to admit defeat was Phantom Princess. She pulled Li Mu's sleeve and said in a low voice, I was wrong. I won't talk about her like that in the future. Zhou Yi was silent for a while and also said in a low voice, At most, I won't call her a vixen anymore. The two of them, one was stronger than the other, and one had a higher status than the other. If Li Mu didn't show some of his authority as the head of the family, when Phantom Princess broke through, he wouldn't be able to control the family anymore. When the two of them were here, he had to be fair and impartial. After putting away the spiritual snail, he hugged Phantom Princess again and said, I didn't mean to scold you. It's just that you're making things difficult for me. I never thought that the two of you could be like sisters, but don't always be at each other's throats and not give in. Phantom Princess snorted and said, She was the one who said that to me first. Li Mu said, She's petty. It's not the first time you know that. Just give in to her. Phantom Princess felt much better. She raised her head and asked, Then tell me, am I more sensible than Zhou Yi? Li Mu hurriedly said, Yes, you're the most sensible. Half a day later, after comforting Phantom Princess, Li Mu flew out of the Thousand Fox country. He took out the spiritual snail and injected his power into it. Soon, the Empress's voice came from the other side. Go accompany your 1,000 demon queen. Don't worry about me. Li Mu asked, Your Majesty, are you still angry? Zhou Yi said, I'm not angry. Li Mu smiled and said, I knew that Your Majesty is the most open-minded. I just scolded Phantom Princess and told her to learn from Your Majesty. Don't throw a tantrum and think about the big picture. Zhou Yi's tone became gentler. You saw it too. She's the one who always goes against me. Li Mu said, She grew up in the mountains and doesn't know the rules. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. Zhou Yi gave a light snort and said, It's good that you know. The Empress was obviously no longer angry. Li Mu also let out a long sigh in his heart. He was more and more aware that there were too many women in the backyard, and each one of them was not a simple person. If he wanted to live a peaceful life, he had to learn how to talk to people and ghosts. When necessary, he had to learn how to talk to people and ghosts. This wasn't cheating, but a white lie. It was also a necessary skill for a lecherous person. After leaving the demon country, he made spiritual snail porridge with the Empress while flying south. The ghost region of Yudu was to the west of the Great Zhou and to the south of the demon country. It was a mysterious place shrouded in thick fog. Compared to the demon country, there were even fewer people in Yudu. Even human cultivators wouldn't go too deep. The entire Yudu was shrouded in thick fog. With the eyesight of a human, they couldn't even see their fingers when they stretched out their hands. Even cultivators of the three middle realms couldn't sense the situation 300 yards away. This fog wasn't ordinary either. It was filled with baleful aura. If a mortal came in contact with it, they would fall seriously ill or die suddenly. Cultivators couldn't replenish their spirit chi from it, so very few of them went deep into the ghost region. However, this was the sacred ground of ghost cultivators. Souls were originally of the Yin attribute, so there was an inexhaustible amount of baleful aura. To them, it was a natural place to cultivate. Great Zhou, Jianghu County. To the west of Jianghu County was the ghost region that the commoners feared. After passing through a bamboo forest shrouded in fog, one would reach the boundary of the ghost region. This place was known as the Forest of 10,000 Ghosts. It was a forbidden place in the hearts of the commoners, and they had to be careful when they went near it. Standing outside the forest, one could occasionally see wandering souls and ghosts. Due to the formation set up by the government outside the forest, the ghosts in the forest didn't dare to walk out of the bamboo forest. However, to cultivators, the Forest of 10,000 Ghosts was an excellent place to obtain soul energy. Soul condensation realm cultivators thirsted for soul energy. The simplest method, which was allowed by the imperial court, was to obtain soul energy by killing ghosts. There weren't many ghosts in the Great Zhou, and even if there were, they would hide everywhere. However, the ghost region didn't lack soul bodies. Therefore, cultivators would often enter the Forest of 10,000 Ghosts in groups of 3 to 5 to hunt the ghosts here. The Forest of 10,000 Ghosts was the outermost area of the ghost region. There weren't any powerful ghosts here, and most of them were some Yin spirits that didn't have the power to resist, as well as a small number of vengeful spirits and evil spirits. As long as one didn't go too deep into the ghost region, there wouldn't be much danger. Outside the Forest of 10,000 Ghosts, there was a town. There were a few inns built in the town specifically for these cultivators to stay. Li Mu wasn't in a hurry to go deep into the ghost region. Instead, he found an inn to stay in. He planned to first investigate some information about the ghost region. Up until now, he knew very little about the ghost region. The Empress said that Shangguanli had brought people to the ghost region. After Li Mu arrived here, he used a sound transmission magic tool to contact her, but he found that he couldn't reach her. He had wasted quite a bit of time on Huan Ji. It seemed that Shangguanli had arrived here before him, and it was very likely that she had already entered the ghost region. Another mysterious thing about the ghost region was that the fog that filled the ghost region had a strange power. As long as one entered the ghost region, all kinds of sound transmission magic tools couldn't be used, and they couldn't be used for long-distance communication. Because cultivators were constantly coming and going, the town was bustling. Other than the inns, there were also shops that sold fulu, pills, and magic tools. Other than that, there were also shops that sold maps of the ghost region. Li Mu glanced at the fulu. They were all low-level auxiliary fulu, used to destroy evil and kill ghosts. Their quality was average, but they were enough to deal with low-level ghosts. What he was interested in was the map of the ghost region. However, when Li Mu used a few spirit jades to buy a map, he realized that the map only recorded a few areas at the edge of the ghost region. With the ghost region's uniqueness, without a complete map, even if he entered, he would be blind. Li Mu walked to the counter and asked the shopkeeper, "Do you have a map of the entire ghost region?" The shopkeeper shook his head and said, "How could a small shop have such a thing? But young man, I advise you to walk around outside. The ghost region is not a good place. The deeper you go, the more dangerous it is. Don't lose your life before you catch a ghost." Li Mu had originally planned to ask the Empress, but when he walked out of the shop, a fragrant wind suddenly blew past him. A female cultivator walked in front of him and asked, "Fellow cultivator, are you also planning to go deep into the ghost region?" Chapter 576. Li Mu looked at the young female cultivator in front of him and did not say anything. The two of them did not know each other. She must have taken the initiative not to strike up a conversation. She must have other motives. As expected, seeing Li Mu's gaze, the female cultivator took the initiative to say, "I heard in the shop that you want a complete map of the ghost realm. I guess that you want to go deep into the ghost realm. Coincidentally, we also have the idea of going deep into the ghost realm to hunt ghosts. Why don't we travel together? The depths of the ghost realm are filled with danger. One more person means one more chance to protect ourselves." Behind the woman stood 3 cultivators, 2 men and 1 woman. The girl's cultivation level was just at the spirit condensation realm, while the two men had already stepped into the divine power realm. The woman who spoke to Li Mu was also at the divine power realm, the same cultivation level as Li Mu. After all, the ghost realm was not human territory. The complicated environment made the ghost realm even more dangerous than the demon kingdom. It was fine to hunt small ghosts in the Thousand Ghost Forest. If they wanted to go deep into the ghost realm to hunt more powerful ghosts, cultivators had to travel together. In this town, there were cultivators looking for partners everywhere. The ghosts and wraiths in the Thousand Ghost Forest could no longer satisfy the needs of cultivators above the spirit condensation realm. What they wanted to hunt were ghosts in the spirit realm. Li Mu looked at the woman and asked, "Do you have a complete map of the ghost realm?" The woman nodded and then said, "However, with our strength, we can only go 500 miles into the ghost realm at most. Any deeper and it will be dangerous. I wonder if you are willing to travel with us. Whoever kills the ghosts along the way will have the soul power. If we work together to kill the ghosts, we will distribute it according to contribution." Shangguanli had entered the ghost realm first. If Li Mu wanted to get the map, he had to return to the divine capital. Since these people had the map, Li Mu did not want to trouble them. At most, he would help them in a while and treat it as a reward for obtaining the map. Under the woman's expectant gaze, Li Mu nodded and said, "All right, but can you let me take a look at the map of the ghost realm first?" The woman straightforwardly handed a jade slip to Li Mu. Li Mu pressed it against his forehead for a moment before returning it to her. He said, "Thank you." Then, the woman introduced the other people to Li Mu. "My name is Wu Qian. This is fellow Taoist Zhang Man, fellow Taoist Ding Liang, and this is fellow Taoist Chen Yingying. How should I address you?" Li Mu. Although he hadn't shown his true face yet, there were many people with the same name in the world, so he wasn't worried that others would suspect him. When the two male cultivators heard Li Mu's name, they didn't feel anything strange. However, the girl named Chen Yingying's beautiful eyes suddenly lit up as she said, "It's the same name as my martial ancestor." Li Mu smiled and asked casually, "Little girl, which sect are you from?" The girl said, "I'm from the Divine Talisman sect." "What sect are you from?" When the girl reported her sect, Li Mu couldn't help but look at her twice. In addition to the ancestral court, the Fulu school had many outer sects, and the Divine Talisman sect was one of them. In this way, he could barely be considered a disciple of the Fulu school. Of course, Li Mu wouldn't reveal his identity. He said, "I don't belong to any sect. I'm just a rogue cultivator." After introducing themselves, Li Mu knew that among the four people, except for Chen Yingying, who could barely be considered an outer sect disciple of the Fulu school, the other three were rogue cultivators. Therefore, they needed to take the risk and go to the ghost realm to obtain soul power resources. As for Chen Yingying, she went down the mountain to gain experience. To have the cultivation of the spirit condensation realm at the age of 18 or 19, she could be considered a little talented. However, for such a young disciple, after breaking through, it was necessary to enter the world to temper herself. The five of them walked into the 100 Ghosts bamboo forest together. Wu Qian reminded them, "Everyone, stay together. Don't get separated. It's fine here, but after going deep into the ghost realm, once you get separated, it'll be difficult to meet again." After walking into the bamboo forest, the surroundings began to be filled with a faint mist. This mist contained a strange power that even divine senses couldn't probe too far. For cultivators, divine senses were their eyes. With their divine senses suppressed, everyone lost their sense of security and became very vigilant. Occasionally, soul bodies would fly out of the mist. These souls were full of ruthlessness and didn't have intelligence. They only instinctively thirsted for human essence blood and yang qi. They were the targets of cultivators. As for those soul cultivators with intelligence, the cultivators who entered the ghost realm couldn't wait to avoid them. In a place like this, the strength that soul cultivators could unleash was far beyond their own strength. If they encountered soul cultivators, the prey and the hunter would often switch identities. Li Mu didn't really do anything along the way. The souls that pounced on them from the fog and attacked them were all dealt with by the other four people. In the beginning, the group only encountered wraiths and evil spirits. As they continued to go deeper into the fog, fourth realm vile souls gradually began to appear. At this time, everyone would often work together to kill them and divide the soul power equally. At a certain moment, the mist in front of them fluctuated again. Except for Li Mu, The others immediately raised their spirits. Soon, a few figures walked out of the mist. But this time, it wasn't ghosts that appeared from the mist, but humans. There were also 5 people on the opposite side. When Wu Qian and the others saw this, not only did they not relax, their expressions became even more nervous. The faces of the people on the opposite side also appeared vigilant at the same time. A few of them even held their weapons. The atmosphere between the two sides was very tense. Not long after, the 5 people walked to the left side of the mist and their figures quickly disappeared. The 4 people beside Li Mu also breathed a sigh of relief. Wu Qian looked at Li Mu and asked, "Fellow Taoist Li, is this your first time in the ghost realm?" Li Mu nodded and said, "I've never been here before." "No wonder." Wu Qian shook her head and said, "Fellow Taoist Li, if you come to the ghost realm again in the future, you must remember that the most dangerous thing here is not the ghosts without intelligence, nor the powerful ghost cultivators, but the human cultivators like us. If you encounter them, you should hide if you can, but if you can't hide, you must not let your guard down." Li Mu cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for the reminder." Wu Qian saw that his expression was indifferent, as if he didn't take it to heart. Instead, her expression became more serious, and she continued, "Fellow Taoist Li may not know, but most of the cultivators who die in the ghost realm don't die at the hands of ghosts, but at the hands of their companions and other cultivators. There are no rules here. Things like killing and seizing treasures happen every day." Li Mu could be more serious and said, "I know." Wu Qian looked at the 3 people beside her and said, "But fellow Taoist Li, you don't have to worry. Addicts Zhang, fellow Taoist Ding, and sister Yingying, we have worked together many times. We originally had another companion, but he was in seclusion to break through the realm these days, so he didn't come with us. That's why we invited you." After encountering other cultivator teams nearby, they obviously became more united. They moved forward for dozens of miles and killed a few evil spirits and a fierce soul. When the 4 of them were happily splitting the soul power, Li Mu's eyebrows suddenly raised, and he inadvertently glanced in a certain direction. There was only thick fog in that direction, and nothing unusual. After a dozen breaths, Wu Qian and the other 2 male cultivators' expressions suddenly changed, and they looked in the direction Li Mu had just looked. A phantom rushed out of the thick fog and rushed straight at them. Feeling the powerful aura fluctuations on the phantom, their expressions changed at the same time. "Not good. It's a 5th realm ghost. This is still the periphery. How can there be a ghost?" Along the way, the most they had encountered were 4th realm vile souls. Ghosts were equivalent to 5th realm human cultivators. Although they did not have intelligence and could only move based on instinct, they were still not something a 4th realm cultivator could fight against. Wu Qian made a prompt decision and said immediately, "Everyone, stay calm and attack together. Take care of each other and don't get separated." At this moment, the importance of a team was reflected. A divinity realm cultivator would not be a match for a 5th realm ghost. However, for divinity realm cultivators and a spirit conduit realm cultivator could fight against a ghost without intelligence. Of course, the most important thing was that they had Li Mu. If not for Li Mu's secret methods, this ghost that suddenly appeared would have been a battle of life and death for them. They had never encountered a ghost since entering the ghost domain. The 4 of them were already extremely nervous, but as they fought, they realized that this ghost did not seem to be that powerful. Its attack power was not high, but its defense was very weak. It was beaten by their dermic arts until it roared non-stop. "That's it. A 5th realm ghost is only so. If we take its soul energy, we'll have struck it big this time." After realizing that this ghost's strength was only a so-so and that it had been suppressed from the start, the 4 of them were no longer nervous like before. Instead, they were excited and expectant. The light of dermic arts and dermic treasures intertwined even more intensely. If they could harvest this ghost, each of them would be able to get a huge amount of soul energy. Whether it was for cultivation or exchanging it for spiritual jades, this trip would not have been in vain. Although the specter did not have any intelligence, it was being beaten back by several weak existences, which made it even more irritable. It roared and sucked in all the yin qi within a radius of several miles into its mouth. Its body grew several times larger, and its aura immediately increased dramatically. The ghost's sudden change caused the smiles on their faces to disappear. Under that powerful aura, their hearts trembled with fear. At this moment, the ghost let out a wild roar and swooped down on the 4 of them. Li Mu stood behind the four of them and calmly glanced at the ghost. With just a glance, the ghost's body trembled and it suddenly ran back as if its life depended on it. Li Mu threw out a Fu Lu. With a flash of lightning, the ghost was immediately heavily injured and fell to the ground, unable to float up again. Li Mu walked in front of them and said with a look of pity, "It's a pity that this high-grade Fu Lu was gifted by Elder Zhang. He still has the strength to resist. Everyone, let's attack together." The four of them reacted and were about to attack to completely disperse the ghost's soul body. Shill! A green light flew out from the fog and pierced through the ghost's body. The ghost's soul body collapsed, leaving only pure soul energy. The figures that walked out of the fog condensed it into a soul ball. The face of the male cultivator named Zhang Man immediately darkened. He shouted, "What are you doing?" Among them, a young man glanced at him and said, "This ghost was killed by us. Why can't we take its soul energy?" Chen Yingying took a step forward and said angrily, "We were the ones who injured it first. You stole our prey." The young man sneered and said, "What a joke. The ghosts of the ghost realm don't have a master. They belong to whoever killed them. Do you think you can kill a ghost with just the few of you?" As soon as he finished speaking, a sneering voice came from behind Wu Qian. "Since when did the disciples of Xuanzong have to steal the soul energy of wandering cultivators? If this gets out, I'm afraid you'll become the laughingstock of the cultivation world. What do you think, Qing Xuanzi?" Among the several figures, the young man who had been silent all this time suddenly changed his expression. He stared at the young man opposite him and asked, "Who are you?" Li Mu walked out from behind Wu Qian and said lightly, "I'm just a wandering cultivator who can't stand what you're doing. Strange, Xuanzong is the world's #1 sect, a righteous sect. Why would you do this kind of robbery? You're one of the top 10 disciples of Xuanzong, but you're stealing the soul energy of wandering cultivators in the ghost realm. Do your elders know?" Chapter 577. Hitting people in the face, killing people in the heart. Hearing the strange young man's harsh words, several Xuanzong disciples' faces turned red with shame. Two of them were thin-skinned and even lowered their heads. As this person said, Xuanzong was the #1 orthodox sect on the continent, and also the #1 sect on the continent. As disciples of Xuanzong, they never lacked cultivation resources and were respected wherever they went. It could be said that they had limitless glory. However, ever since the last Taoist exchange, the Xuanzong sect's glorious moment had completely ended. Their Taoist temples in the Great Zhou had all been driven overseas. The largest market in the cultivation world was replaced by the Great Zhou's Luoyang Rui Square. Fulu School and Xuanzong had cut off communication, and the other 4 Taoist sects had also greatly reduced their communication with them. The exchange meeting was disrupted, and the sect's harvest of spiritual jades this time was only about 20% of the previous times, which was simply not enough to meet the needs of the entire sect. For cultivation resources like Fulu, elixirs, and magic treasures, Fulu School, Danding School, Lingaray School, and the South and North schools all refused Xuanzong's orders with the reason that their disciples needed more spiritual jades, so they had nowhere to spend them. What's more, the sect didn't even have enough spiritual jades for cultivation, so the quota of disciples had been reduced again and again. Core disciples like Qing Xuanzi had to personally go down the mountain and go deep into the ghost realm to hunt ghosts here and exchange their soul power for spiritual jades to meet their cultivation needs. They didn't know the cost of firewood until they were in charge. When they really needed to obtain cultivation resources by themselves, they realized how difficult it was to cultivate as a rogue cultivator. Every ghost they killed in exchange for a piece of spiritual jade, they risked their lives and fought for it with their own blood and sweat. Although the ghost realm was big, there weren't many ghosts. It wasn't easy to encounter one, so naturally, they didn't want to give it to others. In the ghost realm, strength was respected. If the ghost they liked was snatched away, they could only blame themselves for not being as good as others. However, they didn't expect that their identities would be recognized. As proud disciples of Xuanzong, the words of this strange young man were undoubtedly a public punishment for them. Qing Xuanzi was already losing face. He said in a low voice, "We've been chasing this spirit for a long time. We've already severely injured it, and that's why you guys took advantage of it. Otherwise, do you think you guys can deal with a 5th-level spirit with your insignificant cultivation?" A few of the Shen sect's disciples nodded in agreement. "Yes." Senior brother is right. We've been chasing this spirit all this time. If it wasn't for the fact that we've already injured it, you all would have already been killed by it. Although the truth was that they had taken advantage of the opportunity to take advantage of the situation, as Xuanzong's disciples, it was really difficult for them to accept it directly. They could only fabricate the truth to regain some dignity. How could rogue cultivators dare to offend Xuanzong? Even if they had resentment in their hearts, they had to swallow it all. I see. Wu Qian's face revealed an awkward expression. She said, "No wonder we found out that this spirit's strength wasn't high. It turns out that you guys have already severely injured it. In that case, this spirit's soul power should belong to you guys." Although the four of them knew that it was Li Mu's Fu Lu that seriously injured the spirit, the truth was not as the Xuanzong disciples said. However, this was the ghost realm, and the strength of the people opposite them was far superior to theirs. If they angered these Xuanzong disciples, even if they killed the 5 of them here, no one would ever know. When Li Mu mocked them just now, Wu Qian's heart was in her mouth. He was still too inexperienced and didn't take her reminder seriously at all. This female cultivator gave them a way out, and the faces of Qing Xuanzi and the others also looked better. They withdrew their soul power and were about to leave when the young man opposite them spoke again. Li Mu sized up Qing Xuanzi and the others, and seemed to have thought of something. He revealed a look of realization and said, "Oh, sorry, I almost forgot. Xuanzong's days aren't good right now. They lost their business, and they're not liked by other sections. No wonder even the core disciples have to go out to hunt ghosts by themselves. We all come out to make a living, and no one has it easy. If you guys want this spirit, then I'll give it to you." Wu Qian's expression changed greatly. She stepped forward and grabbed Li Mu's wrist. She said, "Daoist Li, stop talking." However, her reminder was still too late. The faces of Qing Xuanzi and the other Xuanzong disciples turned completely ugly. As disciples of the world's #1 sect, when had they ever been humiliated like this? What was even more humiliating was that every word this person said was the truth. Every word he said was like an arrow that deeply pierced into their hearts. At the same time that they were humiliated, they also felt a bit of sadness in their hearts. The once glorious Xuanzong had fallen to such a state in less than a year. All the disciples of Xuanzong felt a wave of anger in their hearts. The truth was one thing, but being pointed out and ridiculed was another. A Xuanzong disciple looked at Qing Xuanzi and asked, "Senior brother, what should we do now?" Xuanzong was already a joke in the cultivation world. If this matter were to spread, they would become the joke of all jokes. Even their last bit of dignity would be lost. They absolutely could not sit by and watch such a thing happen. Seeing the reaction of the Xuanzong disciples, the expressions of Wu Qian and the others changed slightly. Their hearts were in their throats. The 2 male cultivators looked at Li Mu with deep resentment in their eyes. If it weren't for his reckless talk and let the Xuanzong disciples take the ghosts and leave, how could things have gotten to this point? The male cultivator named Zhang Man put away his magic weapon, raised his hands, and said loudly, "Friends of Xuanzong, I can swear that I will not say a word about what I saw today. If I violate it, let my inner demons invade and thunder strike me to death." Ding Liang also immediately raised his hands and sat down to make an oath. He quickly said, "I can also make such an oath." When the 2 of them spoke, they also took the opportunity to distance themselves from Li Mu, indicating that they were drawing a clear line with him. At this time, a Xuanzong disciple looked at Qing Xuanzi and said, "Senior brother, even if you violate the oath, it may not necessarily come true. Why don't we just kill them and end it once and for all? Anyway, this is the ghost realm. No one will know. Only the dead can keep secrets forever." Hearing this, the expressions of the people on the other side changed greatly. Wu Qian even drew her weapon and said loudly, "We can promise that we won't say a word about this. Xuanzong is a righteous sect. Do you also want to do such a dirty thing?" "Bastard!" As soon as the young disciple finished speaking, an older disciple behind him slapped him and said coldly, "Killing people to silence them? Do you think Xuanzong is a demon?" He looked at Qing Xuanzi and said, "These people can't be killed, but if this matter spreads, it will damage the reputation of Xuanzong. Why don't we erase part of their memories? Senior brother, what do you think?" Qing Xuanzi nodded. Stealing souls was already a violation of the righteous principle. If they killed people to silence them, then they were really no different from the demons. The pride of Xuanzong disciples came from Xuanzong's position as the #1 righteous sect. If their actions broke the bottom line of the righteous sect, then even the faith in their hearts would collapse together. Qing Xuanzi looked indifferently at the young disciple who spoke just now and said, "After returning to the sect, report to the elders and withdraw from the sect." The disciple's body trembled, and his face immediately turned pale. Then, Qing Xuanzi looked at Li Mu and the others and said, "I don't believe in your Tao oath. Today I won't kill you, but I will erase your memories." Memories were related to the primordial spirit. To erase memories, one had to go through the step of soul-searching. To cultivators, soul-searching was an unacceptable humiliation. But if they didn't agree to these Xuanzong disciples, then today's matter wouldn't end well. After a fierce mental struggle, the two male cultivators, Zhang Man and Ding Liang, still walked out with their heads lowered. Wu Qian's face was filled with grief and indignation. In the end, she helplessly said to Li Mu and Chen Yingying, "Daoist-friendly Sister Yingying, erasing a part of memory is better than dying in the realm of ghosts." Li Mu sighed softly and said, "Then erase your memories." He turned around and looked at the 5 Xuanzong disciples, including Qing Xuanzi, and the 2 male cultivators. A powerful aura surged out of his body and swept across. The 7 of them only felt dizzy, then lost all consciousness and fell to the ground. Wu Qian and Su Yingying were already prepared to have their memories erased. This unexpected scene stunned them and they couldn't come back to their senses. What happened just now? Why did these powerful Xuanzong disciples suddenly fall to the ground? The next moment, they both looked at the back of the figure in front of them. Originally, he was only at the 4th level, but his aura had become as vast as the ocean. After an unknown period of time, Qing Xuanzi woke up from the mist. He only felt a splitting headache. He sat up from the ground and held his head with a confused expression. Just a moment ago, he was still looking for ghosts with his fellow disciples in the ghost realm. The next moment, he was lying on the ground with a terrible headache. Qing Xuanzi, who was at the 5th level, quickly realized that he had lost a part of his memory. Memories wouldn't be lost for no reason, unless it was erased by someone. Qing Xuanzi instantly broke out in cold sweat. What happened just now? Why was his memory erased? What's wrong with me? Why is everyone lying on the ground? My head hurts so much. What's going on with these two? At this time, the other disciples of the Xian sect who had fainted gradually woke up. They looked at each other and their faces were filled with confusion. They were extremely confused in their hearts. Why were they still walking in the fog just a moment ago? Why were they lying on the ground with inexplicable headaches in just an instant? Not only that, but there were also 2 unconscious male cultivators beside them. Soon, another Xuanzong disciple reacted and exclaimed, "Where's my soul bottle?" As soon as he said that, the other disciples' shocked voices were heard one after another. "My soul bottle is gone too. Where did my Dharma treasure go? Who stole my flying sword?" Qing Xuanzi was shocked when he heard that. He subconsciously touched his right index finger and found that his storage ring was gone. Not only were his Dharma treasures in the storage ring, but there were also nearly 10,000 spirit jades. His entire fortune was in there. He suddenly stood up, his expression blank and filled with fear. Their cultivation resources had been snatched away and their memories had been erased. He carefully thought about it and could only remember one thing. He looked at a Xuanzong disciple behind him and clearly remembered that he had once made a decision to expel this disciple from the sect. He had never experienced such a thing. A chill rose from the bottom of his heart. Qing Xuanzi made a prompt decision and said, "Quick, let's leave here." Just as they rushed out of the ghost realm with the 2 unconscious people, there was a fluctuation in the space outside the bamboo forest bordering the ghost realm in Jianghu County, and 3 figures appeared. Wu Qian and Chen Yingying turned around and found that they had already left the ghost realm. The expression on their faces changed from confusion to shock. A moment ago they were still in the ghost realm, but Li Mu held their wrists and took a step forward, and they appeared here. This kind of magic was beyond their understanding. Li Mu waved his hand and a large pile of things fell to the ground. He said to the 2 girls, "Don't just stand there. Divide these things among yourselves." Chapter 578. Wu Qian and Chen Yingying looked at the pile of things on the ground in a daze. Neither of them dared to reach out. Everything that happened just now left them in a daze. Wu Qian was the first to come back to her senses. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Senior, this isn't good." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, they were the ones who stole your soul power first. At most, this is just reciprocity. You don't have to worry about them taking revenge. I've already erased part of their memories." Li Mu had a good impression of these two female cultivators. As women, they had more backbone than the two male cultivators. They didn't betray their teammates at the critical moment, so Li Mu didn't mind giving them an opportunity. At this time, Li Mu noticed that Chen Yingying was looking at him. There seemed to be a guess in her eyes, but she didn't dare to confirm it. When Li Mu looked at her, she looked away in panic. Li Mu didn't say much. He just smiled and said, "Okay, I still have something to do in the ghost realm. This soul power should be enough for you to use for a while. There will be a big change in the ghost realm, so it's best if you don't come in and take risks." Before leaving, he gently patted Chen Yingying's head and said, "Work hard and strive to cultivate in the ancestral court as soon as possible." As soon as he finished speaking, he walked into the ghost fog again. Wu Qian looked at the things scattered on the ground. Her throat moved with difficulty, and then she said to Chen Yingying, "Sister Yingying, you choose first." Chen Yingying said embarrassedly, "Let's choose together." After the two of them finished dividing the cultivation resources, Wu Qian suddenly asked, "Sister Yingying, do you know that senior?" Chen Yingying pondered for a moment and nodded. "He's so young, and his cultivation is so high. Moreover, he doesn't like Xuanzong. Even his name is the same. I can't think of anyone else other than Martial Granduncle." Wu Qian said in surprise, "Ah, he's Senior Ling Jizi from Fulu School." Few people in the cultivation world knew about Li Mu, but everyone knew about Ling Jizi. His battle with the great elder Xuanzong had already spread Ling Jizi's name across the cultivation world. Wu Qian said in realization, "I've only heard of Senior Ling Jizi's name in the past and thought that he was a high and mighty Taoist senior. I didn't expect him to be so kind and not put on any airs at all. It seems that we were able to deal with that spirit so easily because Senior Ling Jizi helped us in the dark." Chen Yingying revealed a love-struck smile and murmured, "Of course. During that grand ceremony, I once saw Martial Granduncle from afar. I didn't expect to be so close to Martial Granduncle in this life. I have to work hard to cultivate and strive to enter the ancestral court as soon as possible. I can't let Martial Granduncle down." Wu Qian said with some envy, "I really envy you disciples of big sections. Wherever you go, you have elders protecting you." Chen Yingying said, "If Sister Wu is willing, you can also join our Divine Talisman sect. With your cultivation, you should be able to enter the ancestral court directly. At that time, I'll have to call you Senior Sister Wu." Wu Qian said happily, "Can I?" Chen Yingying smiled and said, "Of course you can. You can come back to the sect with me now. Master can't wait for such a powerhouse to join the sect." The experience just now caused the distance between the two of them to quickly close. A moment later, they flew into the air hand in hand and flew towards the mountain gate of the Divine Talisman sect. At the same time, in the boundless fog of the ghost realm, a figure was rapidly moving forward. Wherever he passed, the fog would surge violently. Regardless of whether it was a low-level spirit body or a high-level soul body, when they felt that aura, they would instinctively avoid it. Qing Xuanzi and the others carefully walked in the fog and also felt the aura passing by in the distance. A Xuanzong disciple couldn't help but mutter in a low voice, "The ghost realm is too dangerous. Let's not come here in the future." Compared to the Yao Nation, the ghost realm that was shrouded in fog was much more mysterious. No one knew how many secrets were hidden in the fog of the ghost realm. The inexplicable loss of memory, the snatching of soul power from their magic treasures, and the strange experience they had just experienced filled the hearts of several Xuanzong disciples with fear. They didn't want to come here again in their lives. Somewhere in the ghost realm, Li Mu slowly came to a stop when he reached the valley where he killed Yu Han. The ghost realm was different from the Yao Nation. This place was filled with fog that couldn't be explored with divine sense. Even if one had a map, they had to be careful and follow the guidance of the map. The so-called complete map of the ghost realm was actually only the places that people had explored so far. Most of the areas in the ghost realm were unknown places that had not been explored. It was filled with unknown dangers. For thousands of years, countless powerhouses had gone missing in the ghost realm. There was no lack of 6th and 7th realms among them. They relied on their high cultivation and ventured into unknown places alone, never to come out again. When one powerhouse after another silently disappeared in the ghost realm, the cultivators who entered the ghost realm later learned to check the map. The routes marked on the map were all explored by predecessors. They could be traveled safely without any unpredictable dangers. Although Li Mu's cultivation was at Dongxian and could even kill seventh realms, he didn't dare to wander around the ghost realm. After all, there were many seventh realms that had gone missing in the ghost realm. Even in Blood River's memory, he was somewhat wary and fearful of the ghost realm. He couldn't spread his divine sense too far. This made him feel very insecure. Li Mu could follow the route marked on the map and move forward at a moderate speed. Although the ghost realm was large, there weren't many paths that one could walk on. Almost all the cultivators were moving forward along the few routes. Thus, Li Mu met many people along the way. These people were mostly in groups of 3 to 5. They were going deep into the ghost realm to hunt ghosts. When they met each other, they would retreat vigilantly. In the ghost realm, meeting people was far more terrifying than encountering ghosts. Li Mu flew at a low altitude. Suddenly, a wave of dermic power came from the fog in front of him. When he flew closer, Li Mu saw a group of 6 people attacking a ghost. Among the 6 people, 2 of them had reached the manifestation realm. The 4 of them had remarkable abilities. This ghost was no match for them. Its soul was quickly scattered and its soul power was absorbed. The fog behind them surged. The 6 people turned their heads vigilantly. When they saw a figure walking out, their expressions became tense. They gripped the weapons in their hands tightly, ready to attack at any time. However, only one person walked out of the fog. That person only glanced at them and continued to fly forward. Among the 6 people, a fierce-looking manifestation realm cultivator looked at the figure flying away and said in a low voice, "Going deep into the ghost realm, this person actually didn't have any dermic artifacts or soul bottles. He must have a flask heaven magic treasure." Speaking of the flask heaven magic treasure, a look of greed appeared in his eyes. A magic treasure that could store things was the dream of every cultivator. However, the flask heaven magic treasure could only be refined by cultivators above the 7th level. Those who had such a treasure were all core disciples of great sects with super strong cultivators. Seeing through his thoughts, another manifestation realm cultivator beside him reminded him, this person must be a disciple of a great sect or family. Moreover, his status is not low. You'd better put away your thoughts. The fierce-looking man grinned and said, "So what if he's a disciple of a great sect? He only has remarkable abilities. If we secretly kill him in the ghost realm, who will know that we did it? Over the years, there have been at least 8, if not 10, disciples of great sects and families who have died at my hands." The other person pondered for a moment and said, "You'd better be careful. If he dares to go deep into the ghost realm alone, he must have some strength. Don't fail miserably." The fierce-looking man said, "I think he's young. He looks like a newborn calf that isn't afraid of tigers. It's not like we haven't met such a hothead before. If we can get a flask heaven magic treasure, we'll have made a fortune this time." He glanced at his companion beside him and said, "I don't want to let go of this fat sheep in front of me. Don't fight with me. Otherwise, don't blame me for turning hostile." The man shrugged and said, "I only hunt souls. I don't kill people. If you want to do it, go ahead." The fierce-looking man stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. He strode in the direction that the young man disappeared in. 15 minutes. 15 minutes. 30 minutes had passed and the fierce-looking man who had just left had not returned. The rest of the people looked puzzled as they slowly walked forward. Not long after, they saw the fierce-looking man. His eyes were wide open as he lay on the ground. There were no injuries on his body, but there was no sign of life. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and said in shock, "Dead?" A creation realm expert had died just like that. There were no traces of a battle here, which meant that he did not have the chance to attack before he died. Just what kind of cultivation was needed to be able to kill a creation realm expert in an instant? Thinking of that ordinary young man, the few of them shuddered at the same time and felt a chill in their hearts. After finishing off the cultivator who was filled with a murderous aura and wanted to kill him for his treasures, Li Mu continued forward. There was no day or night in the ghost realm. There was only an eternal white fog that made it impossible to feel the passage of time. After walking for an unknown period of time, a faintly discernible city suddenly appeared in the fog ahead. At the city gate, the words Fengdu were as red as blood under the light of the lanterns. Chapter 579. The Ghost Realm was not like the Yao Nation, where one could casually occupy a mountain and use it as a cultivation cave. The fog that covered the Ghost Realm was filled with wandering souls. Although these wandering souls were souls, they were different from ghost cultivators. They did not have intelligence and would attack any living being or even their own kind. Moreover, they were very sensitive to spirit chi fluctuations. Once they sensed a living person or soul body nearby, they would actively search for it. Therefore, even ghost cultivators did not dare to be exposed in the wild for long periods of time. In order to avoid being disturbed by wandering souls, they built cities in the Ghost Realm and lived in groups, forming ghost cities. Fengdu was one of them. In the entire Ghost Realm, there were 5 major powers. 4 of them belonged to the 4 great ghost kings, and the last one was the Demon Path Soul Hall. The master behind Fengdu City was one of the 4 7th Realm ghost kings, Rakshasa King. Fengdu City was on Li Mu's path. If he wanted to continue, he had to pass through the city. There was a rule in the Ghost Realm that had to be obeyed, and that was to strictly follow the map of the Ghost Realm. This was the experience of countless seniors who used their lives to conclude. If one changed the route on their own, the outcome would often be very miserable. At the gate of Fengdu City, dozens of figures formed a long line and slowly entered the city. Most of them were ghosts, and only a few were humans. The relationship between the Ghost Realm and the Great Zhou was not as tense as the relationship between the Yao Nation and the Great Zhou. In the wild, people often hunted ghosts, ghost hunters, and human hunters. However, in the main city, if people did not attack ghosts, ghosts would not attack people. Li Mu walked to the back of the line and silently followed them into the city. Fengdu City was not a place that could be entered as one wished. Before entering the city, one had to pay 50 spirit jades. Those who did not have spirit jades had to pay the equivalent amount of soul power. It was like a large toll booth. Some stray cultivators who did not have enough money might not even be able to pay the entrance fee. After walking for about 15 minutes, it was Li Mu's turn. Li Mu took out the soul bottle that he had already prepared and took out a ball of soul power. The ghost soldier at the gate accepted the soul ball and glanced at him indifferently, then said coldly, "Enter." The city was covered by an array formation, so there was no fog. Li Mu walked into the city, and the first thing he saw was an incomparably wide street. It was much more difficult to build a city in the Ghost Realm compared to the outside world, so there weren't many cities here. However, each of them was very majestic. Fengdu City's area was comparable to 10 times the size of the godly capital. The streets were filled with shadows of ghosts. It was truly a ghost city. Of course, to the current Li Mu, ghosts and souls were no longer mysterious in his heart. They were just another form of life, and there was no need to fear them. In other words, when they met Li Mu, they should be the ones to fear. Soul nurturing grass, only 100 spirit jades for 10 stalks. I'm looking to purchase a portion of spectral soul energy. The price will be negotiable. Looking for teammates to hunt wandering souls together. Cultivation must be at least at the 3rd realm. Do not disturb unless you are sincere. On the main street of Fengdu, there were layers and layers of ghostly shadows. These voices continuously entered Li Mu's ears. Other than the Densine energy, there wasn't much difference between this place and the streets of Divine Capital. Li Mu planned to stay in Fengdu City for a few days to gather information. As for the Ghost Realm's Heavenly Book, Phantom Princess and the Empress didn't have much information. They only knew through spies that the Heavenly Book had appeared in the Ghost Realm before. Li Mu still didn't have any more information about the Heavenly Book. He found an inn to stay in and sat cross-legged on the bed. He closed his eyes and focused. His ears began to emit a faint golden light. This was the highest realm of Buddhism's hearing. It was called heavenly hearing. It had the same effect as the legendary clairvoyant ear. It could capture any sound within a certain range. With Li Mu's current cultivation, more than half of Fengdu City was under his surveillance. However, this divine ability couldn't penetrate the formation. Some places that were covered by the formation weren't within the surveillance range. Li Mu used his divine ability. Gradually, countless voices entered his ears. This year, Fengdu City's taxes have increased by another 10%. I can't live like this anymore. Why don't I go somewhere else next year? Where else can I go? All the big cities are the same. In comparison, Lord Rakshasa King is still better. Seoul Hall. I heard that they don't even take taxes. Seoul Hall doesn't take taxes, but they take lives. If you join them, you have to work for them. But our Lord Ghost King has too many reasons to increase taxes. Every time little Rakshasa King marries, he has to collect taxes. He only marries once a month. How are we supposed to live? After an unknown period of time, Li Mu opened his eyes. Although he heard a lot of information, there wasn't a single piece about the heavenly book. Due to the special environment of the ghost realm, long-distance communication was impossible. There were many inconveniences in transmitting information. Perhaps not many people knew about the heavenly book. However, for such a big matter, the Lord of Fengdu City, Rakshasa King, must know. However, there was a formation outside the Ghost King Palace. Li Mu couldn't eavesdrop. However, he just heard that today was the wedding day of Rakshasa King's son. All the reputable people in Fengdu City had gone to the Ghost King Palace to congratulate. Perhaps there was a chance to sneak in. Li Mu walked out of his room and came to the street. He walked in a certain direction. He had never been to Fengdu City before, but the place with the most powerful formation in the city must be the Ghost King Palace. The entire Fengdu City was filled with ghost qi. However, the Ghost King Palace was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. It was bustling with noise and excitement. Countless strong ghost cultivators were lining up to present their gifts. Li Mu stood at a distance and observed. He realized that sneaking into the Ghost King Palace was easier than he thought. The ghost soldiers at the entrance only recognized gifts and not people. As long as they presented enough gifts, they would let people in. Li Mu recalled the information he just heard. The Ghost King Palace seemed to only use the monthly wedding as a way to collect gifts and earn money. This was also a disguised form of exploitation of the ghost cultivators in Fengdu City. Li Mu walked slowly to the entrance and took out a fist-sized soul bottle that he had prepared beforehand. Inside it were the spoils of war that he had plundered from Xianxia and the others. The ghost soldier at the entrance of the Ghost King Palace opened it and took a look. He nodded and said, "Go in." They did not even register their names. The intention of the Ghost King Palace for the wedding was too obvious. However, this also saved Li Mu the trouble of making up an identity on the spot. He walked into the Ghost King Palace and followed the flow of people. He came to a huge palace. There were countless short tables placed in the palace. On top of each table was a pot of wine and a few simple dishes. The ghost region was filled with qi. Grains and vegetables from outside could not grow here. The ingredients for these dishes had to be purchased from outside. They were considered precious in the ghost region and were not commonly seen. In the palace, there were already many ghost cultivators sitting in groups of 3 to 5, whispering to each other. Li Mu found a corner and sat down cross-legged. He poured himself a cup of wine and held it in his hand, sipping it slowly. Suddenly, his gaze moved slightly. He looked at the few people in front of him from the corner of his eyes. A golden light flashed in his ears. Several level 5 ghostly cultivators were communicating with each other using their divine consciousness. Have you heard? A few days ago, a page of the heavenly book appeared in our ghost region. What's the heavenly book? It can't be. If you don't even know about the heavenly book, what are you cultivating for? The heavenly book is the most precious treasure in the cultivation world. Every time it appears, even if it's just one page, it will cause a storm of blood. This time, I'm afraid many people will die because of it. No wonder Lord Ghost King, who rarely leaves Fengdu, has left. The temptation of the heavenly book is hard to resist even for 8th realm and 9th realm cultivators, let alone 7th realm cultivators. A ghost cultivator's eyes flashed. He said, "The heavenly book contains the great Tao of cultivation. I heard that this heavenly book is the long-lost ghost Tao heavenly book. If we can get it, we might be able to cultivate to the Ghost King realm." Another ghost cultivator shook his head and said, "Forget it. The heavenly book is so precious. I'm afraid all the major forces in the ghost region will fight for it. It won't be our turn." That ghost cultivator said, "That's not necessarily true. If we're lucky." Lucky? The ghost cultivator beside him glanced at him and said, "That page of the heavenly book last appeared in the land of the fallen gods. Do you dare to go?" That ghost cultivator was still harboring hope, but after hearing the words land of the fallen gods, his body couldn't help but tremble. He immediately extinguished that thought. Other than a few major cities and the roads that connected them, there were more unknown lands in the ghost region. Those regions were filled with danger. Once one entered, it would be difficult to walk out. These unknown lands had different levels of danger. The land of the fallen gods was one of the most dangerous regions. Even seventh realm cultivators weren't willing to go too deep. Land of the fallen gods? In the corner of the hall, Li Mu put down his wine cup. He thought to himself that the soul energy wasn't wasted. There were clearly many high-level ghost cultivators in Fengdu who knew about the heavenly book. Without further ado, Li Mu planned to leave immediately and head to the so-called land of the fallen gods. Suddenly, an extremely soft voice sounded in his ears. "If I had known, I would have waited for Lord Li. There's nothing we can do even if Lord Li is here. If Lord Li is here, we might be caught by the Azura King together. What should we do now?" The voice came from a side hall in the Ghost King Palace. Li Mu turned his head and looked in that direction. His expression was slightly startled. Chapter 580. Fengdu, Ghost King Palace, in a side hall. A ghost woman floated into the side hall and placed a red wedding dress at the head of the bed. She said indifferently, "Change into this. It's almost time. Young master won't show mercy to women. If you anger him, you and the people around you won't have a good ending." Without waiting for the woman's reply, she floated out of the side hall. Beside the woman, the 4 spies of the bamboo guards looked worried. They were originally here to investigate the news of the heavenly book. When they were passing through Fengdu City, Commander Shangguan happened to be fancied by the son of Luocha King. After Commander Shangguan rejected him, the little Luocha wanted to forcefully kidnap them, and a conflict arose between them. Of course, the little Rakshasa and his subordinates were no match for them. However, the fight in Fengdu City quickly attracted Rakshasa King's attention. He sealed Commander Shangguan's magic power and brought them to Ghost King Palace. There was supposed to be a joyous occasion in the Ghost King Palace today. Little Rakshasa had changed the original bride and wanted to marry Commander Shangguan to him. Before they could find out about the heavenly book, they were already trapped in the unfamiliar ghost region. Shangguan Li sat in front of the bed with an icy expression. She only regretted not listening to His Majesty and working together with Li Mu. If he was here, they wouldn't be in such a passive situation now. However, she also had her own pride in her heart. As the commander of the bamboo guards, if she needed other people's help for everything, how could she live up to His Majesty's trust? This time, she acted alone to prove herself, but she didn't expect to fall into such a situation as soon as she entered the ghost realm. After several hours of attacks, the seal in her body had become impulsive. Even if she couldn't kill the little Rakshasa, she could still injure him severely. However, by then, she would completely lose her ability to resist. The biggest problem was how to leave Fengdu, Rakshasa King's territory. Even if Rakshasa King wasn't in Fengdu, he still had countless strong men under him. Without a cultivation of the 7th realm, it would be difficult to break out. Shangguan Li sighed. If only Li Mu was here now. Although he had snatched away His Majesty and was never polite to her, at least in this situation, he could give her a sense of security that no one could replace. Shangguan Li looked in a certain direction with melancholy. Suddenly, a figure walked out from a wall at the end of her line of sight. Because she was looking forward to Li Mu's appearance too much, she even started to hallucinate. Li Mu passed through the wall and saw Shangguan Li sitting by the bed. Her eyes were lifeless, pitiful and helpless. Lord Li. It wasn't until the 4 spies of the bamboo guards discovered Li Mu that Shangguan Li came back to her senses. Looking at the figure that really appeared in the hole, she was both surprised and delighted. "How did you find this place?" Li Mu glanced at her and said, "If it wasn't for me coincidentally coming in to ask for information, you would have married a ghost. His Majesty told you to wait for me so we could move together. Why didn't you listen?" Shangguan Li lightly snorted and said, "You still say that you were in the Yao Kingdom and that the ghost realm was right next to you. You should have arrived much earlier than me. When I came from the Shen, due to Jianghu County, Where were you? Her reason left Li Mu speechless. He rarely went to the Yao nation, and it was rare for Huanji to see him. Before they parted, it was normal for them to kiss each other and do things that they loved to do. Li Mu waved his hand and said, I was delayed by an important matter. What happened to you two? After listening to the explanation of a bamboo guard spy, Li Mu found out that the moment they entered the ghost realm, they were captured by Rakshasa King. After seeing Shangguan Li, the little Rakshasa decided to change the ghost bride on the spot. Femme fatale ah! Li Mu sighed and said to Shangguan Li, get on the bed. Your cultivation has been sealed, right? I will help you remove the seal first. For spies stood guard at the door. Shangguan Li and Li Mu sat cross-legged on the bed. Li Mu placed his hands on her back and sent his magic power into her body. She quickly felt an obstruction. It was a seal, but it was already loosening. Rakshasa King still underestimated Shangguan Li. Even though she had just entered the Dongxian kingdom, she often followed the empress. Her methods were not something an ordinary Dongxian could compare to. If she was given a bit more time, she would be able to break this seal by herself. It might be a bit painful. Bear with it. Li Mu channeled his magic power and attacked the seal in her body. Shangguan Li groaned and her face turned red. She gritted her teeth and said, can't you be a bit gentler? Li Mu shrugged and said, be careful next time. It was not that he wanted to be so violent to Shangguan Li. It was just that unless the seal was removed by the person who said it, there was only one way to break the seal. She only suffered a slight internal injury, which was already considered his outstanding skill. Shangguan Li took out a healing pill and swallowed it. Then she asked Li Mu, have you found out about the heavenly book? Of course, Li Mu glanced at her and said, if I don't check it myself, can I count on you? Shangguan Li took a deep breath. She did not want to be angry with him. She still wanted to say something, but at this time, there was already an aura rapidly approaching outside the door. A gloomy young man pushed open the door and saw a woman wearing a wedding gown and a veil sitting at the head of the bed. He walked forward and said, Beauty, as long as you are sincere with me, I will not treat you unfairly. In Fengdu City, you can do whatever you want. The woman at the head of the bed did not move. The young man smiled and said, What's wrong? Are you shy? He was full of anticipation. He reached out and lifted the veil, but he saw the face of an unfamiliar man. The extremely handsome man smiled at him and said, Are you surprised? Are you surprised? The young Rakshasa did not have time to be shocked. The figure of a woman suddenly appeared above his head. A golden hoop fell from above and wrapped around his neck. Then it quickly tightened. The powerful mana fluctuations that had already erupted from the young man's body were immediately calmed down after being wrapped by the golden hoop. Li Mu and Shangguan Li worked together to give the son of the Rakshasa king a surprise. After that, they threw him to a corner of the teapot space. His father was a 7th realm Xianxia. The young Rakshasa's strength was not weak either. He was at the 6th realm. If they did not catch him off guard and give him a chance to resist, he would cause a lot of trouble for Li Mu and Shangguan Li. After Li Mu's arrival, Shangguan Li naturally treated him as the backbone. She asked, What do we do now? Li Mu thought for a moment and said, There should be more than one Dongxian in the Ghost King Palace. In order to not arouse their suspicion, let's put on an act first. We'll rest here for a night and leave tomorrow. It was not easy to get here. Li Mu did not want to leave just like that. Since the Rakshasa king was not here, the Ghost King Palace lacked top-notch masters. If he did not plunder this place before leaving, he would be letting Ali down. Of course, there was another important reason. You don't know the cost of money until you're in charge. After truly taking charge of the Fulu school, Li Mu realized that the rise of a sect required too many resources. As one of the 5 major powers of the Ghost Realm, it must have a rich foundation. He planned to search the treasury of the Ghost King Palace tomorrow to supplement his family. Li Mu took the opportunity to lie down on the bed and said, Let's sleep. We'll talk about other things tomorrow morning. Shangguan Li looked around the hall and only saw the bed Li Mu was lying on. Then she asked Li Mu, If you sleep on the bed, where will I sleep? Li Mu, you can just grab a chair and make do for the night. Shangguan Li said, I'm a woman. Shouldn't you let me have my way? Li Mu glanced at her and said, Other than your body being that of a woman, which part of you looks like a woman? the first female official serving the Empress of the Great Zhou, the leader of the spies of the Great Zhou court. With her identity and the things she did not seem like a woman who should be let have her way. Moreover, would a woman like another woman? Shangguanli frowned and said in a low voice, I really don't know why Her Majesty likes you, Li Mu retorted. If Her Majesty doesn't like me, does she like you? Am I wrong? Shangguanli was infuriated by these words. She pointed at Li Mu, her chest heaving up and down for a long time. In the end, she just waved her hand and said, You are the Empress. Whatever you say is right. This subject will listen to everything the Empress says. Chapter 581. Shangguanli was clearly in a bad mood, and Li Mu knew that it wasn't just a day or two that she was in a bad mood towards him. In the past, Li Mu had at most taken away some of the Empress's love, but now, he had even taken away the Empress's person. Li Mu poked at her sore spot, so she poked at his sore spot in return. For a man, those words were extremely insulting. Fortunately, Li Mu's skin was thick. Although she was a woman who liked women, Li Mu still couldn't lie on the bed with a clear conscience. He got up from the bed and sat on the chair beside the table, saying, You're injured, you sleep on the bed. Shangguanli didn't get on the bed, but poured herself a cup of tea and drank by herself. Li Mu also poured a cup of tea, took a sip, and then asked, Ali, when did you start to like women? Shangguanli glanced at him and lightly said, What does it have to do with you? Li Mu shrugged and said, Since we're idle, why don't you tell me, how did you start to like Her Majesty? Shangguanli simply ignored him. The reason for her special feelings towards the Empress, Li Mu could somewhat guess. She had been by the Empress's side since she was young, and couldn't come into contact with other outstanding men. The Empress treated her like a younger sister, giving her full trust and protection, so it was natural for her to like the Empress and be close to the Empress. Li Mu wasn't jealous of her, nor did he see her as a love rival, nor did he discriminate against her sexual orientation. It was just that the Empress would be his sooner or later, and if Ali couldn't walk out as soon as possible, the one who would be hurt in the end would be herself. Seeing that she was ignoring him, Li Mu said, Actually, I feel that you don't like Her Majesty that way. To you, Her Majesty is like a sister. She has always protected you, loved you, and you worship her, but this isn't love. Shangguanli finally looked up at him and said lightly, You're not me. How do you know what I'm thinking? It was a good thing that she was willing to respond. Li Mu continued, As I said, your feelings for His Majesty are more of worship and admiration. Perhaps you don't like women, but only His Majesty. Think about it. Have you ever had feelings for other women? Shangguanli looked at him with disdain and said, Do you think I'm like you, lecherous man? My love for His Majesty is unique. Li Mu asked straightforwardly, Do you know what it feels like to like someone? Shangguanli coldly snorted, I don't need you to teach me. Li Mu said patiently, Liking someone doesn't mean that you want to be by her side for the rest of your life. Friends also have this idea. Think about Sister May. Don't you want her to be by your side all the time? Do you like her too? Shangguanli thought about it and immediately shook her head. Li Mu continued, Your feelings for His Majesty are not that kind of love. You want to be with him for the rest of your life because you're used to it. You may meet a man in the future who wants to be with him for the rest of your life. You'll be angry because of him, but you'll also be happy because of him. When you're happy, you'll think of him. When you're unhappy, you'll also think of him. When you're in the most difficult and helpless situation, you'll still think of him. Shangguanli fell into deep thought, and then shook her head again. That's right. Li Mu clapped his hands and said, When you meet this person, don't hesitate. Boldly pursue him. He's the one you really like. Shangguanli's face showed an incredulous expression and asked, Is this liking? Li Mu said with certainty, If this doesn't count as liking, then what does? Shangguanli looked at him and fell into a long silence. After an unknown period of time, she looked at Li Mu again and said, I'm going to sleep. With that, she walked to the side of the bed and lay down in her clothes. Li Mu did not sleep. He sat in front of the table and closed his eyes, beginning to comprehend the contents of the heavenly tomes. Although he had deciphered all the heavenly tomes in his hands, to truly master them, he still needed to put in a lot of effort. The next day, when it was close to noon, Li Mu opened his eyes. He turned his head to look beside him. Shangguanli was lying on the bed in the same position as last night. Her hands were behind her head, and her eyes were open as she stared at the ceiling. He did not know what she was thinking, as if she had not slept the whole night. In the Ghost King Palace, the servants were busy as usual. Ever since the young master entered the new madam's room last night, he had not come out. The servants in the palace were already used to this and did not find it strange. After an unknown period of time, the door of the palace opened from the inside. 2 figures walked out. The servants bowed one after another. "Greetings, young master." "Greetings, madam." Li Mu, who had turned into a little Rakshasa, waved his hand and said, "Dismissed. I'll bring madam around to familiarize herself with the house." It was not until the two of them were far away that the servants of the Ghost King Palace opened their mouths in surprise. What's wrong with the young master? In the past, he would abandon the brides after playing with them for 2 or 3 days. Why is he treating the new madam so well this time? It's not strange. I heard that the new madam is a human expert, and her cultivation is no weaker than the young master's. She was personally captured by the Ghost King. Of course, she's different from the previous ones. If that's the case, the palace will have a new madam in the future? Who knows? Let's just do our own thing. Don't ask about other things that you shouldn't ask. Li Mu wandered aimlessly around the Ghost King Palace with Shangguanli. It seemed like he was bringing her around to familiarize herself with the place, but in reality, Li Mu was not familiar with the place. It was too risky to recklessly capture a servant and search their soul. There was also the risk of being exposed. Before plundering the Rakshasa King's treasure, Li Mu did not want to be exposed. Although 7th Realm experts usually had their own Flask Heaven space, the Flask Heaven space of the 7th Realm was not very big. They might carry some important treasures with them in the Flask Heaven space. As for other basic resources, the Flask Heaven space could not contain them at all. What Li Mu needed were spiritual jades, soul energy, and other basic cultivation resources. He had many treasures on him. The Dao Bell for defense, the sky-piercing spear for close combat, and the sun-shooting bow for long-range attacks. As for other things, he was not interested in them at all. After passing through another door with Shangguanli, a 3-story palace appeared in front of Li Mu's eyes. The palace's entrance was heavily guarded. There were actually 4 5th Realm ghost cultivators. A palace that could be guarded by so many experts was naturally not an ordinary place. Just as Li Mu walked forward, another ghost cultivator cupped his fists and said, "Young master, Lord Ghost King has ordered that no one is allowed to come near this place." Li Mu glanced at him and said, "Of course I know. I don't need you to remind me." Then, he looked at Shangguanli and said, "Madam, remember, Father doesn't allow anyone to come near this place. You shouldn't come near in the future either. Otherwise, if Father blames you, even I can't help you." In order to cooperate with Li Mu's act, Shangguanli could only accept this form of address. She nodded and said, "I know." Li Mu left with Shangguanli. After passing through another door, he said, "Give me your hand." When Shangguanli heard this, not only did she not do as she was told, but she also took a step back. She hid her hands behind her back and looked at Li Mu warily. A few black lines appeared on Li Mu's face. He said unhappily, "What are you thinking about all day?" "I want to use my mystical power to enter that palace. If I don't hold your hand, how am I going to bring you in?" When Shangguanli heard this, a trace of shame flashed across her face. She hurriedly stretched out her hand. Li Mu, on the other hand, did not move. He snorted and said, "Since you don't believe me, then wait here by yourself. I will go in alone." Shangguanli hurriedly took the initiative to hold his hand. She lowered her head and said softly, "I'm sorry, I was wrong." Chapter 582. Shangguanli's hand was icy cold. After she took the initiative to hold his hand, Li Mu gazed at the palace in the distance, silently calculating the distance. Contrary to Li Mu's feelings, Shangguanli held hands with a man for the first time. She only felt that his palm was strong and warm, just like when she was held by His Majesty when she was young. This gave her a sense of security from the bottom of her heart. Li Mu held Shangguanli's hand with one hand and formed a seal with the other, silently saying, "Okay." He took a step forward, and the two figures strangely disappeared on the spot. When they reappeared, they were already inside the palace in front of them. After countless practice, Li Mu already knew that the principle of distance reduction was similar to space jumping. It could ignore any obstacles between 2 points, except for formations. He had already sensed the fluctuations of the formation in this palace, but it was not outside, but inside. In the incomparably spacious main hall, in front of Li Mu and Shangguan Li, there was a mountain of spiritual jades, ranging from low-grade to mid-grade to high-grade. This Rakshasa king's wealth was actually much richer than that of Jianghu nation. Thinking of the wedding banquet held at least once a month in the Ghost King Palace and the exorbitant entrance fee in Fengdu City, Li Mu did not find the scene in front of him strange. Rakshasa King was obviously an expert at fleecing people. No wonder he wanted to build such a large palace in his residence. Just these spiritual jades alone were not enough to fit in the flask heaven space that he could create in the 7th realm. Li Mu's 9th realm abode was more than enough to fit these spiritual jades. However, outside this mountain of spiritual jades, there was a protective shield that was filled with faint black fog. He let go of Shangguan Li's hand and carefully observed this protective shield. With the warmth of her hand still lingering, Shangguan Li felt a sense of loss. She raised her head and glanced at Li Mu, then quickly looked away. At this time, Li Mu discovered that this barrier was a defensive array formation. Moreover, its grade wasn't low. After deciphering the Spirit Array Faction's heavenly book, Li Mu's knowledge of array formations was extremely rich. After carefully studying the array formation for a while, Li Mu fell into deep thought. It wasn't that he couldn't break this array, but it would take a long time. There wasn't enough time for him to slowly break the array. Of course, other than techniques, one could also use brute force to break the formation. The formation in front of him was only a matter of a few spears or arrows, but in that case, the commotion would definitely be earth-shattering. It would alarm the guards outside and Fengdu City's Rakshasa King subordinates, and things would become incomparably troublesome. Li Mu thought for a moment and took out a paintbrush. Back then, he had learned the art Dao from the Empress for a long time. Not only had he flirted with the Empress, but he had also truly learned some true skills. However, the art Dao was a special ability. It was very difficult to directly use it in battle, but it couldn't be more suitable to use it here. Li Mu held the paintbrush in his hand and held his breath. When the tip of the paintbrush touched the barrier, his entire person entered a strange state. His arm moved slowly. Very quickly, a door appeared on the barrier that was surrounded by faint black fog. Li Mu walked through the door. The array formation wasn't touched at all. Under Shangguan Li's strange and shocked gaze, Li Mu waved his hand. The mountain of spiritual jades in the hall disappeared into thin air, leaving only an empty ground. After that, Li Mu walked out again. With a light stroke of the paintbrush, the barrier returned to normal. Done. Li Mu put away the paintbrush and slowly flew up to the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor was filled with countless wooden shelves. Countless soul bottles were placed on them. In the cultivation world, spiritual jades and soul power were the most basic cultivation resources. Who knew how much the Rakshasa King had accumulated, but at this moment, all of them were in Li Mu's pocket. The 3rd floor of the hall was filled with spiritual herbs. Li Mu did the same and didn't leave a single stalk for the Rakshasa King. Although this kind of behavior was somewhat like that of a bandit, the Rakshasa King was the bandit first. Moreover, Li Mu wasn't a good person. The principle he adhered to was that if people didn't offend him, he wouldn't offend them. If people offended him, they wouldn't be able to settle it without paying a price of hundreds of millions. Just as Li Mu had guessed, there wasn't a single precious treasure in this treasury. Presumably, the Rakshasa King had taken it with him. However, he could only leave these spiritual jades, soul power, and spiritual herbs produced in the ghost realm at home. Inside the Demon Emperor's cave, the little Rakshasa King, whose cultivation was restricted and tightly bound, was thrown into a corner of the space. At one moment, he saw a mountain of spiritual jades in front of him, and then dozens of wooden shelves with countless soul bottles. After a while, spiritual herbs produced in the ghost realm fell like raindrops. His face was filled with shock and his heart was filled with bewilderment. What were that adulterous couple outside doing? After ransacking the last hall, Li Mu extended his hand to Shangguan Li. This time, she didn't say anything and obediently placed her hand in Li Mu's hand. Li Mu took a step forward and the two figures disappeared on the spot. Outside the treasury, several Fifth Realm ghost cultivators were still conscientiously guarding the place. Li Mu, who had returned from a rewarding journey, held Shangguan Li's hand and took a leisurely stroll in the Ghost King manner. The ghost servants in the manor kept bowing to them. "Greetings, young master and young madam." Li Mu's expression was cold and arrogant as he ignored these ghost servants. The little Rakshasa king was usually this arrogant in the manor, so it wouldn't attract any suspicion. If he could avoid conflict, it was best not to. He wasn't afraid of the Rakshasa king, but once his identity was exposed, the devil path might send experts to capture him. If it was someone like the Yu and Ming elders, Li Mu wasn't afraid. If he couldn't win, he could always escape. However, if there was another 10,000-year-old monster like Blood River and a Devil Path Elder, his situation wouldn't be optimistic. Returning to the side chamber, Li Mu first kept the 4 bamboo guard spies in the Demon Emperor's space. Then, he planned to leave with Shangguan Li directly to the land of the fallen gods. When the Rakshasa king returned, he would find that his treasury had been emptied by Li Mu. When he walked out of the side chamber, a figure floated in front of him. It was an old man. When he saw Li Mu, who had turned into the little Rakshasa king, he didn't show much respect. He just cupped his hands and said lightly, "Young master." The little Rakshasa king had a 6th realm cultivation. Li Mu couldn't search his soul, and he didn't know the ghost cultivator in front of him. In this situation, it was better to say more. He glanced at the old man and said, "I'll bring young madam out for a walk." The old man didn't think much and stepped aside. Watching the two of them walk away, he just shook his head. For someone like the little Rakshasa king to be able to cultivate to the 6th realm, it was all because he had a good father. This time, he found a human 6th realm Tao companion. His cultivation might be able to advance even further. To think that he had cultivated bitterly for 100 years to reach his current realm. In this world, there was really no comparison between ghosts. Li Mu and Shangguan Li held hands intimately and walked safely to the entrance of the Ghost King Palace. About 10 steps forward, they were outside the palace. At this moment, more than 10 figures suddenly rushed in from outside. These were all female ghost cultivators. They were quite good-looking, and their cultivations ranged from the 3rd realm to the 5th realm. When they saw Li Mushi, these female ghosts rushed over in a flurry. "Husband! You haven't been to her place for a long time. You can't forget about your old love just because you have a new one." Surrounded by these female ghosts, they wanted nothing more than to press their soft and perky bodies against Li Mu. More than 10 pairs of hands touched his body naughtily. Li Mu instinctively pushed away the things on his body and took 2 steps back. This feeling of being surrounded by strange female ghosts and touching his body made him extremely uncomfortable. However, this action caused a female ghost at the peak of the 5th realm to change her expression. She had been with the little Rakshasa king for 10 years and was one of the people most familiar with him. The person in front of her looked like the little Rakshasa king, but he felt very different from the little Rakshasa king. She stretched out her arms and stopped her sisters. After taking a few steps back, she stared at Li Mu and said coldly, "You're not the little Rakshasa king. Who are you?" A female ghost behind her said in surprise, "Sister, what are you talking about? He's obviously our husband." "No, he's not." The female ghost stared at a certain spot on Li Mu's body, then looked at her own hands and said in a low voice, "He's not the little Rakshasa king. The feeling doesn't feel right." Chapter 583. Never in his wildest dreams would Li Mu have thought that after he had fooled the entire Ghost King Palace, and had almost slipped away without a trace, he would fail at the doorstep. These gorgeously dressed female ghosts were each more seductive than the next. They were all the wives and concubines of the little Rakshasa, and they knew each other's strengths and weaknesses. Li Mu could transform into the little Rakshasa's appearance, but the appearance and body shape were only the surface. How could Li Mu possibly know the details? Moreover, even if he wanted to, he did not know the little Rakshasa's size and touch. Who knew that his harem was filled with a bunch of female perverts? On the opposite side, the female ghosts all showed signs of alertness. The strongest one even formed a seal with both hands, forming 2 snakes of yin qi. The snakes were as thick as buckets and several feet long. They opened their huge mouths and lunged at Li Mu and Shangguan Li to devour them. Li Mu raised his head to take a look. Two beams of golden light shot out from his eyes and struck the giant snake's head. The giant snake's body immediately collapsed and dissipated into the void. Human sixth realm. The female ghost's expression changed drastically. She raised her head to the sky and let out a shrill shriek. At the same time, she crushed a jade talisman in her hand. As the jade talisman shattered, countless auras erupted from all over the Ghost King Palace and Fengdu City, rapidly closing in on them. At the same time, on the four walls of Fengdu City, black light flashed wildly. In an instant, a gigantic semicircular dome appeared, enveloping the entire Fengdu City. What's going on? What's going on? Why has the Great City Defense Formation been activated? Could it be that a strong enemy has invaded? The sudden turn of events caused the ghost citizens of Fengdu City to turn pale with fright. They raised their heads and looked at the dome above them. One by one, figures flew over their heads and headed in the direction of the Ghost King Palace. Li Mu sighed inwardly. He had wanted to keep a low profile, but in the end, a conflict was still unavoidable. Looking at the countless powerful auras approaching them, he turned to Shangguan Li and asked, "Do you want to hide in the cave first? I'm afraid I won't be able to take care of you later." Shangguan Li snorted and moved closer to Li Mu. She stuck close to him and said, "Don't look down on me. You just advanced a few days earlier than me. I can protect myself. You just have to take care of yourself." Her eagerness to excel was carved from the same mold as the Empress. Furthermore, she was even more outstanding than the Empress. Li Mu did not say anything more. His figure slowly rose into the air. Looking around, countless figures were currently rushing over here. 3 of the auras were abnormally powerful, and all of them were at the 6th level. 2 of them were eerie, and the last one was a human. 3 6th realm powerhouses surrounded Li Mu and Shangguan Li from 3 different directions. The female ghost below said sternly, "Lord Consecrator, capture them." "He's not the little Rakshasa." The eyes of the elder that Li Mu had seen earlier flashed, and he asked in a low voice, "Who are you? Where is the little Rakshasa?" Since his identity had already been exposed, Li Mu did not need to hide anymore. His figure and face changed, and he returned to his original appearance. The only human among the 3 6th realm powerhouses said in a low voice, "How dare you, human? How dare you cause trouble in Fengdu City? What are you waiting for? Capture him first and hand him over to the Ghost King." This person was a middle-aged man with a thin face. He wore a black robe with a pale white skull embroidered on his chest. Although he was a human, the aura on him was even colder than ghosts. As he spoke, a ghost fork appeared above his head. The ghost fork split into 2, 2 into 4, and soon there were hundreds of them. They shot toward Li Mu with extreme speed. The power of each of these ghost forks was enough to kill a transcendent. Even Dong Xian would have to be serious when facing hundreds of them. The other 2 elders did not make a move. Clearly, they wanted to use this person to test the strength of this intruder. Facing the ghost forks that covered the entire space and sealed the entire void, Li Mu's body flashed with a golden light. The shadow of a bell enveloped him and Shangguan Li. The ghost forks pierced the Dao bell and dissipated. Only one of them let out a deafening sound and broke. The middle-aged man's body trembled, and his aura weakened slightly. He was shocked and blurted out, "What kind of Dharma treasure is this?" This ghost fork looked ordinary, but it was a treasure in his hands. He had used it to kill countless enemies, but it was broken just like that. While his heart ached, he looked at the shadow of the bell, and a trace of fire appeared in his eyes. He quickly approached the bell and used all kinds of spells to bombard the bell. However, he could not break through the bell's defense. To be more precise, there was not even a splash. The middle-aged man was shocked and angry. He said sternly, "Coward, don't hide in the bell if you have the ability. Come out and fight me fair and square." As soon as he finished speaking, the bell shadow around the person in front of him slowly disappeared. The middle-aged man was delighted. This person was indeed young and could not be provoked. A blood-red long saber appeared in his hand. He raised it with both hands and slashed down fiercely. A blood-red saber light that was hundreds of feet long locked onto Li Mu and reached him in an instant. When the middle-aged man took out the blood-red long saber, the 2 old ghost cultivators revealed a smile on their faces. The cultivation world was incomparably cruel. Giving up one's advantage because of a little provocation was undoubtedly a very foolish action. Being locked onto by the blood-red saber, there was generally no suspense about the outcome of this battle. If they were in the young man's shoes, they would also be seriously injured. The middle-aged man floating in the air also thought so. This blood-red saber had drained 70% of his magic power. He looked at the young man under the blood-red saber and waited for him to be split in half. Suddenly, a cold light appeared in his eyes. The moment the cold light touched the blood-red saber directly collapsed. However, the cold light became even more intense. The next moment, a long spear appeared in front of him and pierced through his body. His body was pierced, and his primordial spirit was also severely injured. He had no chance to react at all. A golden rope was wrapped around his body. With his remaining strength, he could not break free at all. Li Mu held the long spear in his hand and stepped on the middle-aged man's body in the air. The world was silent. Bloodsaber, Lord Bloodsaber pays his respects. He defeated Lord Bloodsaber in one move. Is this person a powerhouse of the upper realm? It's over. Lord Ghost King is not here. With such a powerhouse invading, Fengdu City is going to welcome a big change. There was a lot of discussion in Fengdu City. The expressions of the two sixth realm elderly ghostly cultivators changed drastically. After looking at each other, they joined forces to attack Li Mu without hesitation. They were no match for the blood saber alone. Only by joining forces would they have a chance. While the two of them attacked Li Mu, the dozens of fifth realm ghostly cultivators near the Ghost King Palace set their sights on Shangguan Li. In Fengdu City, many powerhouses took out their Dharma treasures and flew towards Li Mu. Facing the two sixth realm ghostly cultivators who were rushing towards him, a bow appeared in Li Mu's hand. He knocked the bow and casually shot an arrow. Wherever the arrow passed, a black line appeared in the air. The speed of the golden arrow was so fast that it was impossible to dodge. It pierced through the chest of an elderly man. At this moment, 90% of the Densine energy on his body dissipated. Li Mu reached out his hand and grabbed at the air. A large illusory hand appeared in the air and grasped the elderly man's extremely weak soul. As long as he clenched his fist lightly, this sixth realm powerhouse's soul would scatter. This was the result of Li Mu being merciful. If he had increased his transcendence energy by just a bit, this ghostly cultivator would have died under the power of the sun-shooting bow. One should always leave a way out. Li Mu had no enmity with him. There was no need for him to be calculative with a worker ghost under the Rakshasa king. One spear and one arrow. Out of the three sixth realm powerhouses in Fengdu City, one was under his foot, and the other was in his hand. The entire Fengdu City suddenly quieted down. The other elderly man's figure that was flying towards Li Mu stopped abruptly. The yin energy on his body tumbled, just like the shock and fear in his heart. Not far away, the ghostly cultivators of Fengdu City, who were planning to swarm forward to help the two consecrators and gain some credit at the same time, fled for their lives at a speed faster than when they came. When they raised their heads to take a look, their already pale faces turned even paler. The ghostly cultivators who were attacking Shangguan Li also stopped one after another. Fear appeared on their faces. The remaining sixth realm elderly man calmed himself down. He looked at Li Mu and said with difficulty, "This junior was blind to have offended senior. I hope that senior will not blame me on account of the Rakshasa king. If senior has any requests, this junior will try his best to fulfill them." Li Mu crossed his arms and said, "I don't have any requests. I just want to leave Fengdu, but you guys won't let me." At the entrance of the Ghost King Palace, the flirtatious female ghost knelt on the ground powerlessly. Her face was full of regret. If she had known that this person was an old monster who had concealed his cultivation level, she would have pretended not to know and let him go. How would things have turned out like this? Chapter 584. Ghost King Palace, Central Hall. Li Mu had planned to leave, but they forced him to stay. Although he didn't want to expose his identity, he had already fought. If he left right after the fight, wouldn't he have wasted his transcendence energy for nothing? He sat at the very front of the hall, on an extremely luxurious chair made from a single piece of supreme-grade spiritual jade and carved with dragons and phoenixes. Below him were the servants of the Ghost King Palace, including 3 sixth realm consecrators. Shangguanli stood beside Li Mu. Li Mu looked up at her and asked, Ali, do you want to sit too? Li Mu wasn't the empress after all. He felt uncomfortable sitting here with his friend beside him. Shangguanli glanced at Li Mu and shook her head. No need. I'm used to standing. Li Mu grabbed her wrist and shifted his butt to the side, saying, You're used to standing, but I'm not. Anyway, this chair is big enough for 2 people. Shangguanli was forced to sit down by Li Mu, but she didn't say anything. However, after witnessing that scene with her own eyes, a complicated feeling spread through her heart. Experts of the same cultivation level as her couldn't even block a single blow from him. She didn't know when it started, but Li Mu's cultivation level had already caught up to hers. And now, she couldn't even see his back. Li Mu didn't feel anything. His previous opponents were all 7th realm experts like Elder Xuanzong and the Elder of the Demon Sect. The Dongxian he met was also a 10,000-year-old monster like Patriarch Blood River. He rarely fought with cultivators of the same cultivation level. Due to his lack of experience, he didn't know how to hold back. So when he fought just now, he held back. If he was careless, at least one of the 3 6th realm consecrators would die. Under Li Mu's gaze, everyone lowered their heads, not daring to look him in the eye. Li Mu looked at them and said indifferently, Devil King kidnapped my friend and forced her to marry his son. Since Devil King isn't here today, I didn't want to bully the weak and planned to settle the score with him when he returned to Fengdu. However, all of you refused to let me off and forced me to make a move. If the ghost cultivators standing in the hall had intestines, they would definitely be green now. The people of the Ghost King Palace would get married every few days. Some of them were willing, while others were forced. However, in their eyes, it was not a bad thing even if they were forced to join the Ghost King Palace. Even if the little Rakshasa liked the new and hated the old every few days, they were still part of the Ghost King Palace. Be it cultivation resources or servants, they did not lack anything. Their lives were much better than before. They were just unlucky this time. The person that Lord Ghost King kidnapped actually had such a powerful backer. Originally, this senior was a man of martial ethics and did not intend to vent his anger on them. However, they had to provoke him. Blood Blade Venerable Master and the Ghost Cultivator who was severely injured and almost had his soul dissipated were extremely regretful. It's all this junior's fault for being blind. Please forgive me, senior. This junior has eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Senior, please forgive me. Li Mu looked at them and said indifferently, Did you think that I would forgive your offense just because of your words? Please forgive us, senior. Please forgive us, senior. As soon as Li Mu finished speaking, everyone in the hall immediately knelt down. Li Mu waited for a while and gave the 3 6th realm powerhouses enough psychological pressure before he said slowly, The heavens are virtuous. I'm not a murderous person. Otherwise the 3 of you would be dead by now. The 3 immediately bowed. Thank you, senior, for not killing us. Li Mu said coldly, Don't be happy too early. Originally, I had no karma with you, but since you provoked me, you have already planted the seeds of evil. Serve under me for 10 years and remove the karma, and I will let you go. Otherwise, I will use an even simpler method to remove the karma. The 3 of them naturally understood what a simpler method meant. When a person died, karma would dissipate. There was no simpler way to remove karma than to silence them. These transcendent old monsters had all seen through some of the principles of heaven and earth, and they placed great importance on karma. They were guests under the Devil King. Betraying the Devil King would definitely infuriate him, and there would be trouble in the future. However, if they did not agree to this, they would be in big trouble now. While the 3 of them were hesitating, Li Mu said leisurely, I have never liked to force others. If you are unwilling to serve under me, I will not force you. The 3 of them trembled at the same time. This was a blatant threat. Yes. We are willing. We are willing too. Soon, a drop of soul blood and 2 soul essences floated in front of Li Mu. He took them. Seeing the worry in the depths of the 3's expressions, he knew what they were afraid of. He said, Don't worry, Rakshasa King won't have the chance to trouble you. He has already formed a karma with me. Sooner or later, I will settle this with him. Li Mu did not intend to subdue the 3 of them, but now that things had come to this, and he had formed an irreconcilable feud with the Devil King, it would be a waste not to poach them. After all, he was no longer a small disciple of F. Lu School. As the future schoolmaster, he shouldered the heavy responsibility of the school's rise. Xuanzong was extremely powerful. If Lu School wanted to catch up with Xuanzong and avenge Xiao Bai's family, they still had a long way to go. He would not let go of any opportunity to strengthen the school. Although the Sixth Realm was not enough in his eyes, they were still top-notch powerhouses on the continent and were targets that all major forces wanted to recruit. Since they were already on his side, Li Mu was not stingy. He casually threw 2 pills to the middle-aged man and the severely injured ghost cultivator and said, "Take these and heal your injuries." "Thank you, Senior." The 2 of them took the pills and knew that they were not ordinary pills just by smelling them. They immediately clasped their fists and thanked him. They had just become someone's slaves, so they were a little conflicted at first. But now, their thoughts were slowly changing. It did not matter who they became. Compared to the Devil King, this senior was more powerful and had the demeanor of a powerhouse. He was also so generous to his subordinates. It might not be a bad thing to work for him. In the cultivation world, strength was respected. It would not be easy for the Devil King to severely injure them. Following such a powerhouse was not a humiliation. Perhaps they could even obtain greater opportunities. Then, Li Mu let the 2 injured people heal their injuries. The other person comforted the Devil King's subordinates and the ghosts of Fengdu. He originally only wanted to rob the Devil King's treasure house, but he was forced to take over his Fengdu. Just take it as punishment for bullying Ali. Li Mu turned to look at her and asked, "Are you not angry anymore?" Shangguan Li lowered her head and said, "Thank you." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "We're all family. What's there to thank me for?" Shangguan Li blushed and said, "Who's family with you?" Li Mu explained, "His Majesty and I are family. His Majesty treats you as his younger sister, so you can be considered my sister-in-law. As the saying goes, sister-in-laws. In short, we're family. If anyone dares to bully you, I'll be the first to punish them." Shangguan Li was not convinced and said, "Who's your younger sister?" "I'm 3 years older than you." Just as she finished speaking, more than 10 figures rushed in from outside. "I was blind and offended you, Senior. Please have mercy on us, Senior. Please spare us. I'm willing to be your slave and serve you for the rest of my life." Little Rakshas's wives and concubines all knelt on the ground, crying and begging for mercy. It was as if there were thousands of ducks in the hall. Li Mu had a headache from the noise. He waved his hand and said, "I don't want to do anything to you. Disperse." More than half of these female ghosts were snatched by little Rakshasa. Li Mu had no enmity with them, so he didn't want to punish them. He just wanted them to leave quickly and stop bothering him. "Thank you, Senior, for your mercy." Several female ghosts immediately ran out of the hall after Li Mu spoke, but a few stayed behind. The coquettish female ghost in the lead boldly walked behind Li Mu and massaged his shoulders while saying, "Senior, I'll massage your shoulders." The other 2 slightly more beautiful ones knelt on his left and right, one on his right. They put their hands on his legs and said, "Senior, we'll massage your legs." "Aha!" Shangguan Li's expression was cold as she made a heavy sound. Li Mu's mind moved, and the 3 female ghosts were immediately teleported out. He looked at Shangguan Li beside him and said seriously, "Ali, as you can see, I'm a good person who doesn't do anything wrong. When you go back, you can't talk nonsense in front of Her Majesty." Shangguan Li snorted and said, "That'll depend on your performance in the future." Outside the hall, several female ghosts appeared in a flash. They were all shocked. This senior's strength was indeed unfathomable to teleport them away without a sound. The 5th realm female ghost looked regretful and muttered, "This senior is much more powerful than little Rakshasa. It's a pity that he doesn't get close to women." Chapter 585. Li Mu dismissed the young Rakshasa's wives and concubines and ordered someone to find a more detailed map of the ghost domain. The original map he had only marked the safe routes between the major cities in the ghost domain. There weren't many records of the vast unknown lands, and the location of the fallen god's land wasn't on it either. What the 6th realm ghost cultivator gave Li Mu was the most complete map of the ghost realm that had been discovered so far. Not only was the location of the unknown lands marked on the map, but the danger level was also marked. The land of the fallen gods was also on the map. Li Mu had to go to the fallen god's land this time. Firstly, it was for the heavenly book. Secondly, the Rakshasa king was there too. Li Mu had stolen his home when he wasn't there. If he didn't solve the problem of the Rakshasa king, he would lose the territory that he had fought so hard for when he returned. After arranging everything in Fengdu City, Li Mu and Shangguanli left. Regarding the heavenly book, there was no time to lose. If someone else beat them to it, their trip would be in vain. Just as the two left Fengdu City, in the depths of the South Sea, on an island shrouded in ghost fog, a skeleton-like elder opened his eyes from a tall tower and whispered, "Li Mu has appeared in the ghost domain. He should also be here for the heavenly book. This person has so many heavenly books. Maybe he has already discovered the secret of the door." In the stone coffin beside him, the white-clothed woman slowly stood up and said, "Your whereabouts can't be hidden from Tianjizi. If you go out to sea, you will immediately be stopped by him. This time, I will go personally." The skeleton-like elder pondered for a moment and whispered, "Blood River's death is very likely related to him. With your current cultivation, you may not be able to defeat this person." He was silent for a long time. Suddenly, two lines condensed from black fog spread out from his body. The black lines extended into the white-clothed woman's body and connected their bodies. Then, the skeleton-like elder's aura continued to weaken while the white-clothed woman's aura continued to rise from the peak of the sixth realm. After breaking through a certain barrier, it returned to calmness. The black line of mist disappeared, and the old man said slowly, "This way there will be no mistakes." He heaved a sigh of relief and said, "We must obtain the Ghost Path Heavenly Book. That page is different from the others. It has another great use. We must not let it fall into the hands of the righteous." Not long after, a white light flew out from the South Sea Ghost Island and headed towards the coast. Wherever the white light passed, the seawater boiled and evaporated, and countless corpses floated on the surface of the sea. Ghost Domain. Shangguanli was slowly moving forward in a fog-shrouded area. Suddenly, countless black cracks appeared in the space around her. Shangguanli's expression changed. She used her magic power to prop up a shield to protect herself, but she still couldn't stop the cracks from spreading. It was as if they would swallow her up in the next moment. At this moment, a figure teleported to her side and grabbed her waist. In the next moment, the two figures disappeared. The black cracks spread to the previous location and quickly dissipated. Not far ahead, Li Mu and Shangguanli stumbled and fell out of the space. Li Mu's face was pale. After a day, he finally understood why the unknown places were so terrifying. The space here was extremely unstable. It was so unstable that even if someone passed by, the space would collapse. The power of spatial collapse was extremely terrifying. No matter how strong one's physical body was, they would be instantly torn apart by the spatial turbulence. Only their primordial spirit would be left behind. Li Mu removed his hand from Shangguanli's waist and shook his head. "We can't go on like this. Every time we move forward, we are taking a risk. If we are not careful, it will be too late to regret." He and Shangguanli had already encountered spatial collapse more than a dozen times in a day. Although they narrowly survived each time, Li Mu couldn't let Shangguanli take the risk every time. If something happened to her, how could he face the Empress? He thought for a moment and suddenly had an idea. He had almost forgotten something. Li Mu sent a figure out of the flask space. It was Little Rakshasa. As soon as the little Rakshasa was released, she immediately yelled at the top of her lungs, "I don't care who you are. You better let me go immediately. My father is the Rakshasa king, a seventh realm dark ghost. When my father returns, you will all die without a burial ground." Before he could finish his words, he saw a black spatial crack not far in front of him that was growing bigger and bigger. His face changed drastically, and he shouted, "Crazy, you're all crazy. Do you know where this is? This is the unknown place, and even my father doesn't dare to trespass. Are you tired of living?" Li Mu pointed at him and said indifferently, "You scout ahead." Little Rakshasa was stunned. When he came back to his senses, he immediately said angrily, "What? You dare ask me to scout ahead for you? Don't even think about it. Even if I, Little Rakshasa, die here, I will not help you do such a thing." Li Mu looked at him with a faint smile on his face. "Oh, is that so?" he asked. 15 minutes later. Li Mu and Shangguan Li walked leisurely in the fog, following Little Rakshasa's path. Little Rakshasa's aura was weak, and his face was pale as he walked in front, muttering to himself. Bastard couple, how dare you ask me to scout ahead for you? You even pretended to be a bride to trick me. You guys don't do anything related to humans at all. Bah, bastard couple. Li Mu looked at Little Rakshasa and asked, what are you muttering about? And nothing. A smile appeared on Little Rakshasa's face immediately. Brother, I didn't know that I had offended the two of you. Can you let me off? When I return to Fengdu, I will prepare a generous gift for you as an apology. My father is the master of Fengdu and there are countless treasures in his treasury, Li Mu said. Are you talking about that 3-story palace? I've already emptied everything in there. Little Rakshasa was stunned and said in shock. Li Mu looked at him and said indifferently, otherwise, where do you think the spirit jades, soul energy, and elixirs you saw in my cave abode came from? After Little Rakshasa came back to his senses, his heart was bleeding. Those were all his treasures. After his father's lifespan ended and he died, the entire Fengdu was his. This damned man took the treasures that were supposed to belong to him. Soon, he realized that now was not the time to feel sorry for these things. His life was the most important. He pretended not to care and said, I still have dozens of wives and concubines. All of them are as beautiful as flowers and can be used as good cultivation furnaces. If brother wants, I can give them all to you. Li Mu said calmly, I've already dismissed all your wives and concubines. Little Rakshasa was stunned again. His wives and concubines. So many of his wives and concubines were dismissed? Why? His treasures were stolen and his wives and concubines were dismissed. What exactly happened in Fengdu while he was trapped? At this time, Li Mu said again, stop talking nonsense and continue scouting. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Thinking about what happened just now, Little Rakshasa's body trembled. He could only continue flying forward. He was no match for this adulterous couple. If he didn't do as they said, he would probably die here. However, this place was full of threats. If he wasn't careful, he still couldn't avoid the fate of death. Just as he was feeling sorrowful and helpless, he suddenly felt an extremely strong suction force in front of him. A black crack rapidly expanded in front of his eyes. Little Rakshasa activated all his magic power, but he still couldn't avoid flying in that direction. My life is over. Just as Little Rakshasa had this thought, an illusory palm suddenly condensed in the void. Before he could touch the spatial crack, it scooped his soul out. Li Mu clapped his hands and said, change direction and continue. The divine abilities of the dragon race were indeed extraordinary. Under the chaotic power of space, many divine abilities couldn't be used. However, fishing the moon in the water, that he learned from the dragon race's heavenly book wasn't affected. At this time, an aura suddenly approached from behind. A transparent soul came from behind and pounced at Shangguan Li. This soul's strength was extremely terrifying. It emitted a 6th-level aura. When it was only a few feet away from Shangguan Li, Li Mu softly said a word. Freeze! The soul's body froze in the air for a moment. Then, it was pierced by an illusory sword. The soul became more and more transparent. Then, a spear burst out and pierced its body. The soul's body was already extremely transparent. In the end, it collapsed under countless purple lightning bolts and turned into pure soul power, which was collected by Li Mu. There were 2 dangers in the unknown lands of the ghost realm. The first was the space that could collapse at any time. The second was these wandering souls. Outside the unknown lands, most of the wandering souls encountered were of the lower 3 realms. 4th and 5th level were rare. However, within the unknown lands, 5th-level ghosts could be seen everywhere. 6th-level essence souls also appeared frequently. Although Dongxuan's experts could defeat essence soul realm wandering souls, they still had to wait for a while. If several essence souls swarmed together, Dongxuan's cultivation was also at risk of dying. Little Rakshasa saw Li Mu kill an essence soul with the same cultivation as him as if he was killing a chicken. His throat moved. When he saw Li Mu looking at him, he immediately said, I'll continue to explore, continue to explore. While Little Rakshasa was filled with anger and helplessness, he continued to explore. The long silence in the unknown lands of the ghost realm was broken. Somewhere in the fog, Ming-Yi led close to 100 figures forward. At the front, a vengeful spirit was slowly moving. Suddenly, the space was filled with spider-web-like cracks. This vengeful spirit did not even have time to scream before he was swallowed. The Hall of Souls group slowed down. Ming-Yi casually pointed at a soul in front and said, "You go up." That vengeful spirit trembled. He did not dare to disobey the elder's order and carefully moved forward. After 15 minutes, he screamed again and was swallowed into a spatial crack. Ming-Yi's expression was calm as he continued. Next, in another part of the fog, a sixth realm wandering soul was madly struggling in Devil King's hand. He clenched his fist, and this wandering soul collapsed into soul power and was absorbed into his body. Devil King closed his eyes. A moment later, he slowly opened them. He held a compass in his hand and slowly moved forward in the fog. Suddenly, a white light flashed on the compass. The needle noticed that it had deviated. Devil King adjusted his direction and continued to move forward according to the needle. The space where he was originally going to pass slowly cracked open. 100 miles to his left, a woman in white was rapidly flying through the air. Even a seventh realm cultivator would be shocked by this scene. The unknown lands were filled with spatial cracks. If one was not careful, one's body would be torn to pieces by the chaotic power of space. No one dared to travel in the unknown lands at such a speed. Wherever the woman in white passed, there were many spatial cracks. But strangely, she passed through these areas recklessly without any injuries. She was approaching the center of the ghost realm at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, there were countless figures in the ghost realm. They were all moving toward the same destination. At the center of the ghost realm, there was a fog vortex that was hundreds of miles wide that was slowly spinning. Chapter 586. Ghost Domain. Li Mu and Shangguan Li walked along the map. After walking for thousands of miles, the fog in front of them finally began to thin. Logically speaking, as they went deeper into the ghost domain, the fog should get thicker and thicker, and the obstruction to spiritual sense would become stronger. However, when the fog reached a certain level, the closer they got to the land of the fallen gods marked on the map, the thinner the fog became. After walking for another 100 miles, Li Mu finally knew the reason. A huge fog whirlpool that stretched as far as the eye could see was slowly rotating. The nearby fog was attracted by it and was sucked into the whirlpool. This caused the fog that formed the whirlpool to be so thick that it could not dissipate. Outside the whirlpool, there was a normal area without fog. Inside the whirlpool was the land of the fallen gods. At this moment, in front of the land of the fallen gods, in an empty valley, countless figures were waiting silently. Before Li Mu left Fengdu, he had already understood the ins and outs of the heavenly book in detail. A few days ago, a strange phenomenon suddenly appeared in a mountain in the ghost domain, attracting countless ghost cultivators to check it out. In the end, a page flew out from the mountain. Although many people did not know what it was undoubtedly a treasure. In order to fight for this item, a chaotic battle broke out. The page eventually fell into the hands of a ghost cultivator. It was originally an ordinary treasure hunt. If he did not get the treasure, he could only blame himself for not being as skilled as others. However, when the news spread and someone pointed out that the page was the mysterious page of the heavenly book, the various major forces in the ghost domain could not sit still. Very few people in the cultivation world did not know how important the heavenly book was. With a page of the heavenly book, one could establish a sect. It could be said to be the most precious treasure in the cultivation world. Hundreds of years ago, after the Ghost Dao heavenly book disappeared in the ghost domain, it had never appeared again. This time, it was very likely that the page of the heavenly book had appeared. When the news of the heavenly book spread, the ordinary ghosts in the ghost domain did not know what had happened. However, the major forces behind the ghost domain sent out countless experts to hunt down the ghost cultivator who had obtained the heavenly book. That ghost cultivator naturally could not withstand the pursuit of the entire ghost domain by himself. In the process of escaping, he was forced into a dead end. Then, he took the heavenly book and resolutely entered the land of the fallen gods. The land of the fallen gods was one of the most dangerous regions in the ghost domain. The space there was extremely chaotic, and it was easy to enter but difficult to leave. Even seventh realms did not dare to go near it easily. Naturally, it also blocked the pursuers. However, the temptation of the heavenly tomes eventually overcame the humans' fear of danger. This time, many forces of the ghost realm had gathered here and taken the risk to enter the fallen god land for the sake of that one page of the heavenly book. Li Mu was extremely far away, but he could also feel the chaotic power of space ahead of him. Their safe journey here was all thanks to the little Rakshasa's selfless dedication and sacrifice. After almost being sucked into the spatial rifts dozens of times, his cultivation had already fallen from the 6th realm to the 4th realm. In the end, even Li Mu himself felt that this was not something a human would do, so he took the initiative to let him go, allowing him to fall into a deep slumber in the Demon Emperor's abode. Li Mu looked at the huge fog whirlpool and slowly heaved a sigh of relief. They would probably have to wait a few more days to enter the land of the fallen gods. Although the land of the fallen gods was dangerous, it was not without a pattern. Every half a year, the fog tide here would enter a low tide for a month. Entering the land of the fallen gods at this time was the least dangerous. Li Mu's current location was in the vicinity of the land of the fallen gods. The fog tide was the calmest, and it was also one of the safest entrances to this place. Therefore, many people had gathered here before they arrived. In order to prevent their identities from being exposed, both of them used a secret technique to change their appearances. Li Mu and Shangguan Li walked out of the fog and into the valley, which attracted the attention of all the forces present. Everyone who could come here had some ability. There was only one page of the heavenly book, but there were countless people who wanted it. Therefore, everyone here was their competitor. While these people were sizing up Li Mu was also sizing them up. From the area that these people occupied, there were at least 7 or 8 forces that came here before them. They had more people, but each force had at least one 6th realm ghost. Li Mu glanced around. Apart from him and Shangguan Li, there were as many as 11 6th realm ghost cultivators here. This was only one entrance. There were other entrances to the land of the fallen gods. There were many more powerful people in the ghost domain than Li Mu imagined. It was no wonder that the central dynasty did not dare to let down their guard against the ghost domain for so many years. This place was filled with yin qi and was too suitable for ghost cultivators to cultivate. They did not have to go out of their way to obtain cultivation resources. They just floated in the air. It was not an exaggeration to say that this place was a sacred place for cultivation. Li Mu and Shangguan Li found an empty space and waited quietly. Because of the appearance of the two of them, the surrounding ghost cultivators had already caused a small round of discussion. News of the heavenly book spread really fast. Even humans are here. 2 humans want to get their hands on the ghost domain's heavenly book? The 2 of them must not be good people to be able to come here. It will be even harder for us to get the heavenly book. Although there was only one page of the heavenly book, there would be a battle between them sooner or later. However, this was the ghost domain's own business and had nothing to do with the humans outside. Looking at the 2 unfamiliar humans, a cold glint flashed across the eyes of a powerful ghost cultivator. He transmitted his voice to the other person beside him. The ghost domain's heavenly book cannot be given to humans. These 2 humans are big trouble. Instead of entering the land of the fallen gods and fighting with them, why don't we join forces now and get rid of these 2 first? The 2 of them exchanged glances. The other ghost cultivator hesitated for a moment, then nodded lightly and walked toward the other ghost cultivator not far away. Li Mu looked at the huge swirling fog vortex for a while and felt a little bored. He looked at Shangguan Li beside him and realized that she was in a daze. For the past 2 days, she had been absent-minded for no reason. Li Mu wanted to have a casual chat with her, but a smile suddenly appeared on his face. Li Mu suddenly said, "Ali." Shangguan Li turned her head abruptly. "What?" Li Mu stretched out his hand, and a long golden whip appeared in his hand. He handed the long whip to Shangguan Li. Shanghai Li saw 4 ghost figures slowly approaching them from the corner of her eye. She silently took the long whip from Li Mu. The 4 6th realm ghost cultivators approached Li Mu and Shangguan Li from behind without any concealment. In front of them was a huge fog vortex. At this moment, the power of space was extremely chaotic. If they entered, they would most likely die. Behind them, they were surrounded by 4 ghost cultivators and would find it difficult to break through. The rest of the ghost cultivators here temporarily shifted their attention to this place. They did not participate. Instead, they looked like they were watching a show. It was as if they could already see the ending of this human couple. The 4 ghost cultivators approached Li Mu and Shangguan Li to a certain distance. They looked at each other and suddenly burst forth. 4 rays of sorcery light attacked Li Mu and Shangguan Li from behind. However, in the next moment, an illusory small sword appeared in front of the 4 sixth realm ghost cultivators at the same time. This sword appeared abruptly and was extremely fast. It locked onto them at the first moment. There was no way to dodge or avoid it. The small sword pierced through their foreheads. The 4 ghost cultivators' souls were severely injured in an instant. They were shocked. Before they could make any preparations, another ray of golden light attacked from the front. Swoosh! Within the golden light was the shadow of a whip. It arrived in an instant and whipped them. The 4 ghost cultivators, who were already severely injured, dimmed again. They were even on the verge of collapse. At this moment, another 4 golden hoops descended from the sky and looped around their necks. After being bound by the golden hoops, their cultivation was also sealed. They were tied together by a rope and instantly lost the ability to resist. The entire valley was deathly silent. The 4 sixth realm ghost cultivators were the first to launch a sneak attack. They were actually captured by the 2 people in an instant. The 2 people's cultivation was not much different from theirs. However, their coordination was too good. Their Dharma treasures and Abhijna were also specialized in suppressing souls. Especially that illusory small sword, it made all the ghost cultivators present tremble in fear. The scene just now happened too quickly. The ending was too shocking. Some of the ghost cultivators subconsciously shifted their gazes away. They no longer dared to have any ideas about the 2 people. Li Mu casually kept the 4 ghosts in the Demon Emperor's cave abode. He would slowly train them when he had the time. The subordinates that the 4 ghost cultivators brought along stood in a daze. They were fine when they arrived. They followed the Ghost King and narrowly avoided countless dangers. Now that the Ghost King was captured, how were they going to return? A few 5th realm ghost cultivators from the 4 forces gathered their courage and walked in front of Li Mu. They knelt on one knee and cupped their fists. "Greetings, Master." "Greetings, Madam." Li Mu glanced at them and asked, "What are you doing?" A ghost cultivator at the peak of the 5th realm braced himself and said, "We used to follow the Ghost King. You defeated the Ghost King and are our new master." Li Mu glanced at them. He quickly understood why these ghost cultivators were so anxious to acknowledge him as their master. Without the 6th realm cultivators, they were in the unknown lands. They could not return. From here to any city in the ghost domain, they had to pass through countless chaotic spaces and encounter countless powerful wandering souls. With their cultivation, it was impossible for them to pass through. Li Mu looked at them and said, "That's enough. Stand aside." If he left them alone, not many of them would be able to return alive. Their souls would be scattered here. The forces under any one of these 4 ghost cultivators were comparable to a small or medium-sized sect. After being incorporated, they would be a considerable force. Hearing Li Mu's words, the few 5th realm ghost cultivators heaved a sigh of relief. They finally relaxed and called their subordinates to gather together. In an instant, the largest force behind Li Mu actually formed in this valley. At least in terms of numbers, it was enough to look down on everyone. The fog vortex in the fallen god's land was still spinning, but Li Mu could clearly feel that the vortex was gradually slowing down. When the vortex slowed down to its maximum speed, it would be the best time for them to enter the fallen god's land. Time passed slowly as they waited like this. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. In these 3 days, some forces from the ghost domain came one after another. However, most of them were led by 5th realm ghost cultivators. Even if they were not at the 6th realm, they were at the peak of the 5th realm. The chances of ordinary 5th realm ghost cultivators coming here safely were very small. Of course, Li Mu could not keep standing for 3 days. He moved out a stone table, stone chairs, and a small pavilion from his cave abode. He sat in the pavilion and drank tea and played chess with Shangguan Li. However, Li Mu's chess skills were obviously not as good as Shangguan Li's. If she had not been deliberately giving in to Li Mu would probably have been defeated by her in every game. Li Mu held a chess piece in his hand. At a certain moment, He looked at the fog in the distance. Very quickly, a middle-aged man walked out of the fog. The middle-aged man wore a black robe embroidered with dragons and a pearl and jade crown on his head. He looked like an emperor. Behind him were a group of ghosts. There were 2 6th realm ghost cultivators and more than 10 5th realm ghost cultivators. Wherever these people went, the ghosts retreated and took the initiative to give up the most central position in the valley. Behind Li Mu, a 5th realm ghost cultivator exclaimed, "It's Lord King Yama." Lord King Yama actually came personally. Li Mu's gaze swept across the black-robed man. On the surface, there were 4 7th realm ghost kings in the ghost domain. They were the Rakshasa King, the Xianxia King, the Azura King, and the King Yama King. Even 7th realm experts could not resist the attraction of the heavenly book. Among the 4 ghost kings, Li Mu already knew that 2 of them had come here. The Rakshasa King left Fengdu before him, but Li Mu did not see him. He must have chosen another entrance. Along the way, they had to avoid the random spatial rifts that appeared. Even if they set off from the same place, the routes they took in the end would be very different. Not long after the King Yama King and the others arrived, the fog somewhere rolled, and countless figures walked out. Li Mu tilted his head to take a look, and his gaze stopped on a figure. It was an elder who was also wearing a long robe with a black lotus embroidered on his chest. He was one of the 3 elders of Yu and Ming who blocked Li Mu's path last time. Behind Li Mu, a voice exclaimed, "The people of the Hall of Souls are also here." Che had just walked out of the fog when he suddenly felt something and looked towards a certain direction. In a pavilion in front of the fog vortex, a young man's gaze met his briefly before he looked away. Che looked at him again and remembered this person in his heart. This person gave him a very strange feeling, as if he had seen him somewhere before. However, after searching his memories for a long time, he could not find this person's figure in his memories. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.